Chapter 201. Chapter 200 Rumble. At the edge of the vast universe, a fierce battle was raging across the cosmos against the endless enemies pouring out from the melting dimensional walls. And in the midst of that battlefield, smirk. To think my son would declare himself the successor of the Dragon King. The man cloaked in black energy, the shadow monarch Sung Jinwoo, chuckled as he gazed towards Earth. Truly, raising a child was an endless series of unpredictable events. Who could have imagined that the son of the shadow monarch would one day declare himself the successor of the monarch of destruction? Undoubtedly, none of the great beings here had ever envisioned such a future. That's how much of a risky gamble and uncertainty Suho's decision was. However, are you sure this is all right? The monarch of destruction is not someone you can trust. In the first place, awakening the monarchs born from the primordial darkness is an ominous sign. In the worst-case scenario, you're raising an enemy from within during the war. Sung Jinwoo simply shrugged at the concerned words of the rulers. Well, what can I do? It's a decision my son made on his own, so I have no choice but to support him as a father. Sung Jinwoo decided to put all the worries aside and simply respect his son's choice. Of course, there are still other factors, but I have to act like a father for once. Besides, when he thought about it carefully, it wasn't a bad choice. No, it could actually be beneficial if things go well. The rulers also agreed with Sung Jinwoo to some extent. That's true. The more people inherit the power of the deceased monarchs, the greater our forces will become. Even though the monarchs were born from the primordial darkness, they're still on our side when it comes to fighting the enemies from the outer universe. Of course, their fundamental nature of desiring destruction won't change much, but if your son can control that instinct... Enough chatter. They're coming again. Sung Jinwoo's eyes burned coldly as he spotted another rift opening up ahead. Everyone, prepare for battle. A new gate has appeared. All forces, attack. At the ruler's command, the army of the sky charged. Brilliant wings unfolded. The powers of radiance and the outer gods clashed. And in the center of it all, Sung Jinwoo bared his teeth fiercely and unleashed his monarch's domain. Arise, all of you. Whoosh! Legion Commander Beru, our troops will take the vanguard this time. No! Legion Commander Igris, follow me. At the king's command, the soldiers of death, who were recovering from their wounds with black steam billowing from their bodies, rushed into battle. Bring it on! The monarch's blessing is with us. As long as the Shadow's blessing was with them, they were an immortal army that could be injured but never killed. In the vast universe, the immortal army roared like thunder on the Shadow Monarch's deep and wide shadow. In the midst of that war, Sung Jinwoo turned his gaze and muttered towards his son, who was fighting alone in the distance. Suho, my son, I respect your decision, but since you chose to become the Dragon King's successor, become stronger. You must become stronger. The Dragon King's trial. It wasn't just a simple quest. It was a mutual agreement made possible because Antari's desire and Sung Suho's goal happened to align. At the same time, it was a dangerous deal where the balance could be broken in an instant if their interests ever conflicted. So, Suho, if you fail the Dragon King's trial, he will eventually try to devour you. Sung Jinwoo gritted his teeth and worried about his son's future while blessing him. Therefore, become stronger, Suho. Become strong and devour the dragon instead. To survive, you must become the hunter, not the prey. Because you are a hunter. Skill Monarch's Domain activated. Whoosh! On the Monarch's Domain, Suho unleashed. The shadow soldiers roared in unison and leaped forward. Kyag! Slash! Slash! Only the blood and screams of magical beasts were left in their wake. Level up, up. Suho was obsessed with leveling up, entering dungeons recklessly. The Dragon King's first trial, reaching level 99, was both easy and difficult. As his level went up, the amount of experience required naturally increased as well, slowing down his progress. That meant he had to seek out even more dangerous and powerful magical beasts to increase his leveling speed. But that wasn't easy. Dogyun, where's the next dungeon? Sorry, boss. That's all for today. I'll make a reservation for the next dungeon as soon as possible. At some point, it became natural for Lim Dogyun to speak to Suho with utmost respect, regardless of the age difference. It couldn't be helped. He was the only ordinary human who witnessed Suho's monstrous strength and speed as he cleared dungeons from start to finish. Beyond awe, what he felt was reverence. Not only were Suho's shadow soldiers good at hunting, they were also quick at mining and dismantling magical beast carcasses. Sometimes, the shadow of a magical beast Suho had just killed would rise and dismantle its own body, offering it to Suho. It was a good thing the magical beasts were grotesque monsters. If they were human, it would have been a terrifying and horrendous sight. Lim Do-gyun, who witnessed all of this firsthand, could no longer simply see Suho as a close younger brother like before. Then what was the nature of the emotion he felt towards Suho? Fear? Terror? No way. Jackpot. Lim Do-gyun thought to himself, this is a job for life. The work was comfortable, his life wasn't in danger, and the pay was amazing. For an E-rank hunter like him, Woojin Guild was a stable workplace he wanted to dedicate his entire life to, as long as President Sung Suho was around. Boss, I've booked a dungeon. It might be a bit dangerous since the Black Tortoise Guild failed to clear it twice. Even better, let's go right away. The more dangerous the dungeon, the better. Lim Do-gyun followed Suho, who was stepping forward with shining eyes, full of confidence. But then, ouch. As Suho suddenly stopped walking, Lim Do-gyun, who bumped into his sturdy back, clutched his nose and looked up at him. Boss, what's wrong? Suho stood still with a thoughtful expression, and after staring into the air for a moment, he spoke. Do-gyun, let's cancel that dungeon. Huh? Yes, sir. But why? Something came up. Whoosh! As soon as he finished speaking, Suho vanished from the spot. Huh? Lim Do-gyun looked around with a bewildered expression, but his boss was nowhere to be found. Boss? Then, should I get off work? Ryo Singh flew to India at Suho's request and immediately headed to the Asura Guild without taking a break. I need to see the guildmaster right now. I've brought an incredible business deal. Siddharth Bachchan. Ryo Singh's purpose in meeting the guildmaster of the Asura Guild and the most famous S-rank hunter in India was none other than the business deal Suho had proposed. Spring water of the Echo Forest. The right to trade for the Scavenger Guild's detoxification potion, the hottest item in the hunter industry these days. Having secured that incredible deal himself, Ryo Singh's future seemed bright. This time, I'll definitely get promoted. Even if I demand the highest reward possible for an A-rank hunter, the guildmaster will definitely accept it. With his heart pounding with excitement, Ryo Singh flung open the door to the guild office. Huh! Shiver. He instinctively stopped in his tracks, sensing an eerie atmosphere in the guild. What's this? At first he tried to dismiss it as his imagination. It was natural to feel unfamiliar since he was visiting after a long time abroad. Besides, the guild staff he saw here and there were doing their office work as usual. But what is this feeling? Something seems different. Ryo Singh couldn't shake off the ominous feeling as he walked towards the guildmaster's office. Observing the people around him, he discovered something strange. They have no expressions. No matter how busy they were with work, there wasn't a single spark of life in the staff's eyes. And no one is acknowledging me first. Even though he had been on a business trip abroad, many staff members knew his face. At least one of them should have recognized him and greeted him, but no one approached or spoke to him. It's Ryo Singh. I'm here to see the guildmaster. Ah, I see. When he spoke first like this, they responded expressionlessly, but their reactions were all lifeless, as if their souls had been sucked out. I tried calling the guildmaster's office before coming here, but he didn't answer, maybe because he was busy. Is he not in the guild right now? That's right, he's not here. Where is he? Is he on a dungeon raid? Yes. Is that all you're going to tell me? Yes. Ryo Singh tilted his head, puzzled by the continued curt responses. Why were they acting like this? Had something bad happened to the guild recently? In the end, he had no choice but to return empty-handed, and then he suddenly noticed something strange. What are those necklaces? It wasn't anything special, but now that he looked, all the staff members were wearing the same necklace. It had a large blue gem, and everyone, regardless of gender, was wearing it. What's that necklace? Ah, this necklace. This necklace. Huh? When Ryo Singh grabbed someone and asked about the necklace, everyone nearby suddenly turned their heads and looked at him, with bright smiles on their faces. This necklace is a kind of employee ID recently made to show that we belong to the Asura Guild. Would you like one? I'll give you one. No, I will. As necklaces were suddenly offered to him from all directions, Ryo Singh inevitably ended up wearing one the moment he put it on. Ryo Singh, the guildmaster is calling for you. So suddenly, you said he was in a dungeon. Yes, to meet him, you have to enter the dungeon. Well, all right. I've brought a gift for the guildmaster. Ryo Singh nodded, fiddling with the detoxification potion Suho had given him. It was a sample for the business deal, and he was told to make sure Siddharth Bashchan personally tried it. But could it be? Did a dungeon recently appear that requires the guildmaster to personally enter? At Ryo Singh's question, the staff member returned to their expressionless demeanor and answered, Yes, the guildmaster is currently raiding the Dragonian dungeon. Dragonian? Chapter 202, Chapter 201, Dragonians. A collective term for magical beasts that possess a mixture of dragon and human characteristics. They include a wide variety of individuals, from dragon-type to reptilian-type monsters. However, there was one magical beast that came to Ryo Singh's mind first: Naga. India had myths based on various animals, but when it came to dragons, the snake god Naga was indispensable. Could it be that Nagas have appeared? I can't say for sure without confirming on site, but according to the report, their appearance is similar to Nagas. The staff member handed over the relevant documents in a businesslike manner as response to Ryo Singh's question. Oh dear, are they really Nagas? Ryo Singh exclaimed in dismay as he received the documents. The silhouette of a reptile-like monster emerging from the water, the silhouette of the magical beast captured in the photo in the document, was very similar to the Naga that Ryo Singh knew. And of all places, Ryo Singh sighed in regret after confirming the location where the Dragonians appeared. How could this happen? Loktak Lake has turned into a field-type dungeon. He couldn't believe it, to think that such a large-scale disaster had occurred in India while he was on a business trip abroad. Loktak was a large lake located in Manipur, India, one of the largest freshwater reservoirs in Southeast Asia. The entire area surrounding it had turned into a field-type dungeon. Ryo Singh asked the staff member with a stern gaze just how many dungeon breaks occurred around here. A total of 5 happened simultaneously, but thanks to the guildmaster personally clearing one, 4 remain. I shouldn't have been leisurely wandering around abroad. I should have stayed by the guildmaster's side and assisted him. Ryo Singh was heartbroken to think that such a thing happened in his homeland, and he didn't even know. This is no time to be idle. I must go and help the guildmaster right away. Manager, assign all the remaining forces in the guild under my command. All elite hunters have already been deployed to the site. That's to be expected in such a dire situation. Then I'll go alone. Tell me the exact location of the guildmaster. Ryo Singh left the guild with great enthusiasm. Even if he was an A-rank hunter, it was reckless to enter the Loktak field alone. But strangely, none of the staff members in the Asura Guild tried to stop him. Rather, they continued to do their own work expressionlessly, as if possessed, unconcerned whether he went out or not. Their faces were vacant. Only the necklaces around their necks emitted a quiet, faint blue light. And the necklace around Ryo Singh's neck, heading towards Loktak Lake, also. A while later, screech! This is the place! Ryo Singh arrived at the Loktak field with a confident look. He wasn't afraid at all. Even though he came here solo, he was alone. So what? Many guild members would welcome him once he entered. Moreover, he didn't come here empty-handed. He had brought a huge gift for his colleagues who were struggling inside. Wait for me. I've brought a lot of Korean-made hunter equipment. The large truck he rode here was filled with expensive items made by skilled Korean craftsmen. Originally, his plan was to show off his achievements by personally presenting these precious items to the guildmaster one by one. But wouldn't it be even more dramatic to appear with them in such a critical moment? Promotion. This is definitely a promotion. Ryo Singh's heart swelled with excitement as he imagined his colleagues cheering at the sight of this amazing equipment. All right, let's go. Ryo Singh, are you sure it's okay for just the 2 of us to go in? This place is... The truck driver, Jackson, looked at Ryo Singh with a terrified expression. He was a C-rank hunter with a stealth skill, Ryo Sing's former subordinate. He was fired from the Asura Guild last year due to lack of ability, but his driving skills in rough terrain were top-notch. Of course, there isn't much use for a C-rank hunter's driving skills, but he was perfect for transporting goods to a dangerous field-type dungeon like this. Ryo, I can somehow escape with my stealth skill even if I'm in danger inside, but you only have offensive skills. Hey, who's worrying about whom? Jackson, I'll take full responsibility for your safety, so just focus on driving. Namaste. Jackson, the truck driver, who knew Ryo Sing's combat abilities well, closed his eyes tightly. And when he opened them again, his eyes were burning with a sense of mission to save his former colleagues. He gripped the steering wheel and gritted his teeth. Then, let's go. Rumble. And so, a cargo truck loaded with Korean-made equipment boldly entered the Loktak field. Immediately, reptile-like magical beasts blocked their path from all directions. Roar! Slash! Slash! Lizardmen! Jackson! Don't stop! Trust me and keep going! Ryo Sing jumped onto the truck, firmly planted his feet, and gripped his twin swords. He grinned ferociously at the lizardmen charging towards him. They are not Dragonians, just lizardmen. In this urgent moment, a face suddenly came to Ryo Sing's mind. My comrade, Sung Suho. He had been through so many adventures following Sung Suho. The Egyptian pyramids, the glacier dungeon, every single incident he experienced with him was dangerous. And the hunter who survived countless hardships alongside that great hero and finally returned to his home country was, it's me, Ryo Sing. Slash, 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 slash. Ryo Sing's twin swords unleashed a flurry of attacks in all directions. The lizardmen were cut down while screaming, caught in his net-like merciless attacks. Bring it on. I can fight all day. Ryo Sing, protecting the truck while jumping left and right, slaughtering the magical beasts, thought to himself that he somehow resembled Sung Suho right now. No, he definitely did. No matter what anyone says, I am Sung Suho's one and only comrade. The truck sped through the pool of blood Ryo Sing had created. Ryo, I see the lake ahead. This is the real deal, Jackson shouted, pressing hard on the accelerator. Yes, once we pass this, we'll reach the Asura Guild's fortress. Ryo Sing's entire body was already drenched in the blood of lizardmen, but not a single drop was from his own wounds. Jackson also smiled, showing his teeth at the cool look in Ryo Sing's eyes, red liquid still dripping from his forehead. Ha-ha! So Ryo Sing also has that side to him. A rank Ryo Sing. He was undeniably the elite of the Asura Guild, a rising star recognized as a top-class hunter, but he had one fatal flaw. He used his brains too much instead of his body. His only concern was promotion. He was obsessed with fame, loving to be admired and the center of attention. When did that guy become like this? Jackson, who only knew Ryo Sing's past self, felt his heart burning at the sight of him fighting without regard for his own safety, and he sincerely wanted to help him achieve his goal. He took a deep drag of his cigarette and grinned. Then, gripping the steering wheel tightly with both hands, he shouted bravely towards his friend, still engaged in a bloody battle outside. All right, Ryo Sing, I trust you and I'll keep going. I'm heading straight for the lake shore. Protect my path. Stop. And then, it felt as if time slowed down. Jackson's pupils dilated, and he saw Ryo Sing's panicked expression as he desperately ran towards him. Splash! The sound of water reached his ears. Jackson's head instinctively turned to the side. Before it could even rotate completely, he saw the figure of a giant magical beast suddenly rising from the lake. Naga? Bang! The truck Jackson was driving was flung to the side. No, crash! Ryo Sing immediately jumped towards Jackson's truck, which was rolling on the ground, crumpled like a piece of paper. With the superhuman strength of an A-rank hunter, he barely managed to stop its movement. But before being able to check on Jackson in the driver's seat, roar! The giant shadow of the Naga that appeared from the lake loomed over Ryo Sing. Bang! A giant reptilian hand struck down on his head. Ryo Sing's pupils dilated, and a mental calculation ran through his mind. I'm not a tanker. The difference between a dealer and a tanker was significant. As a dealer, he had the strength to stop a truck, but he didn't have the HP or skills to withstand the attack of such a massive magical beast head-on, which meant it's more efficient to dodge and counterattack. That was the perfect strategy as a dealer who gave up defense and used twin swords. But if he did that, Jackson will die if I dodge. Ryo Singh straightened his posture with a determined look and crossed his twin swords, and recalling the image of Sung Suho in his memory, ah! Crack! But the Naga's defense was stronger than he expected. The blade of his sword, hitting the beast's approaching hand, snapped. Despair appeared in Ryo Singh's eyes. No, the reason for his despair wasn't because he was afraid of dying. Even as a dealer, an A-rank hunter like himself wouldn't die from a single hit. However, what was certain was that Jackson, who was in the truck, would definitely die from that attack. Jackson, whom he had urged to come to this dangerous place. No! Whoosh! In that desperate situation. The shadow assassin, Kira, who had been quietly hiding beneath Ryo Singh's feet, moved following his master's command. Ding! The Fedo exchange activated. Bang! Ryo Singh's wide eyes looked forward, at the sturdy back of the man who suddenly appeared before him. At him, who effortlessly blocked the Naga's powerful attack with one hand. At the faint smile that appeared on his lips. Found a useful one. As if its pride was hurt, the Naga roared ferociously and pushed its hand down with even greater force. But for some reason, the man standing before it wouldn't budge. Suho glanced at Ryo Singh and said, "Rest there for a bit. I'll take it from here." And as he turned his gaze forward again, Suho's eyes changed, like a hunter who had found its prey. Arise! Whoosh! Greed! At that moment, the S-rank hunter, who had returned as a shadow soldier, rose before the giant magical beast. Chapter 203. Chapter 202. Hondae, Busan. During the fight against the demon Javier in Hondae, Busan, Suho received a quest from Sung Jinwoo's phantom. Prove your worth. The phantom of the shadow monarch Sung Jinwoo demands proof of worthiness from his son. Defeat the demon magician Javier and gain a new shadow authority skill. Suho acquired Monarch's domain while carrying out this quest, but it was something he awakened on his own, not a reward from the mission. The shadow authority skill he received as a reward for completing it was separate. It was this skill, Shadow L1, Shadow Authority, no mana cost. Allows you to switch positions with a designated shadow soldier. After one use, there is a 3-hour cooldown before it can be used again. Cooldown time varies depending on skill level. This skill allowed him to switch positions with a shadow soldier regardless of their location, making it practically teleportation. Suho immediately grasped the principle behind this skill upon seeing it. It works like a gate. This ability was quite familiar to Suho, who frequently used his shadow as a gate to freely travel between the shadow dungeon and the real world. After that, he practiced a few times to grasp the effectiveness of this skill, then sent the shadow soldier Kira to India with Ryo Singh, just in case. And this was the result. Thud! Grag! Ha-ha! You're withstanding this? You've got quite the resilience. High Priest, Greed, it's not that. We've just become weaker. Shadow soldiers, Greed and Iron, were unilaterally beating up a gigantic and hideous Dragonian, bursting into hearty laughter. Ryo Singh, watching this awe-inspiring scene from behind, couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Oh my god, were Suho's summons always this strong? Naga, with its human-like upper body and sea serpent lower half, was a mini-boss-level monster that only occasionally appeared in high-ranking dungeons. Although their size and strength varied, the steel-like scales covering their entire bodies boasted extreme defense, making them suitable materials for armor, shields, and other protective gear. But those Naga scales are being torn so easily. Thud! Crash! Bang! The tough and sturdy scales of the Naga were being crumpled and torn like paper under the shadow soldier's relentless attacks. They're at least A-rank, maybe even equivalent to S-rank hunters. To think such powerful monsters are just summons created by a single hunter. Ryo Singh couldn't believe his eyes. He couldn't believe it even as he witnessed it. Who would believe him if he told them about this? But this is dangerous. According to the information, Nagas definitely. As expected of the elite he was, Ryo Singh had gathered as much information as possible about Nagas before coming here. They were high-level magical beasts proficient in both combat and magic, giving even experienced hunters a hard time. Moreover, they always moved in groups, despite being very strong on their own, making them even more difficult to deal with. And since this information wasn't widely known because Nagas rarely appeared, Ryo Singh shouted urgently, "Suho, be careful. I heard Nagas always move in packs of at least 30. But before he could finish his sentence, large and small magic basts hidden in the lake emerged all at once, and they attacked Greed and Iron, who were still fighting a single Naga. Slash, swish, roar, but they weren't outnumbered either. Grin. So you're going for a war of attrition? Suho spoke with a meaningful smile. Arise. At that moment, shadow soldiers rose from Suho's shadow all at once. The sight of them fighting against dozens of Nagas was truly spectacular. And witnessing this, Ryo Singh finally realized. Oh my god. He didn't just gain a new powerful summon. He finally understood the identity of the doubt that had been lingering in his mind while following Suho. A hunter who keeps getting nyer. The strength of a hunter doesn't change. That was the basic common sense widely known in society. Hunters could train and become more proficient in fighting magical beasts through training in runestones, but their fundamental power, determined at the moment of awakening, never changed. But to think that a hunter existed who defied that common sense and continued to grow stronger day by day. And he was right here before his eyes. You idiot! Why did I only realize this now? Ryo Singh lamented his lack of insight. Even though summoners had various variables depending on their summons, how could he only now confirm that his comrade, with whom he went through life and death situations several times, possessed a special ability? And then suddenly... Ah! Jackson! Jackson! This wasn't the time for that. Ryo Singh came to his senses belatedly and rescued his friend, who was unconscious in the overturned truck. Judging from the state of the mangled vehicle, it was an accident that could have easily killed the driver. Thankfully, Jackson, a C-rank hunter, seemed to be alive. Don't worry, he's not dead. Beru approached and checked on Jackson, then flew towards Suho, who was busy commanding the battle, but he immediately approached the wounded hunter and poured a potion into his mouth. Cough! Ryo Singh breathed a sigh of relief as Jackson's wounds, which had been bleeding, gradually healed. He felt responsible for dragging his former subordinate into this mess because of his ambition for promotion. At the same time, he was once again awestruck by how special a hunter Suho was. To think that he commanded S-rank level summons and also possessed healing abilities, at this rate, even alone, was like a walking army. Suho, I have a favor to ask. Ryo Singh hurriedly called out to Suho while supporting the unconscious Jackson. Appearing at the perfect moment and saving him was a debt he couldn't repay, but he had no choice but to ask for help shamelessly. All the forces of our Asura Guild are currently deployed here, but at the entrance of this field. It's too strange that Nagas are appearing at the entrance of the field. He was right. This was the entrance to the field. The Asura Guild, which had entered to clear this dungeon, would inevitably pass through here. What were the chances that they would miss such a large group of massive magical beasts? There's no way they would leave them alone intentionally. Something big must have happened that we don't know about. Maybe they did ignore them intentionally. That answer didn't come from Suho. Huh? A lizard? Ryo Singh was bewildered. A small lizard with wings was perched on Suho's shoulder, looking around with a stern gaze. To think there were still remnants of the Naga tribe alive. Well, only cowards survive wars. Antares, who quickly repossessed Ragnar's body as soon as his mana recovered, scanned the Nagas and then narrowed his eyes, sensing a familiar energy resonating around the lake. But this is strange. I sense the presence of Dragonians somewhere. Dragonians? Yes, Dragonians, like the Nagas, were one of the many tribes that served us, and they were all annihilated by your father, leaving not a single one alive. They became part of the Shadow Army. Yes, so I don't understand why there's a Draconian scent here. Could there be survivors like those Nagas? Just then, the battle ended. Rumble! Already? Ryo Singh was shocked at the sight of countless massive bodies collapsing. As expected of experienced workers, Suho nodded with a satisfied smile at Greed and Iron, who had finished clearing the Nagas. Greed and Iron once served as part of the Shadow Monarch Sung Jinwoo's army. They were new recruits who had just joined Suho's forces, but at the same time, they were experienced veterans when it came to commanding shadow soldiers. Well, it was only natural when he thought about it. In his past life, Greed was Huang Dongsu, an S-rank hunter who belonged to the Scavenger Guild, the strongest guild in the United States. And Iron was Kim Chul, an A-rank hunter who was a promising ace of the White Tiger, one of Korea's best guilds. Not only were they strong individually, but they were also general-level soldiers who excelled at commanding troops. Little Monarch, we have successfully completed the task according to your command. After hunting the Nagas, Greed and Iron had other soldiers drag the massive corpses before Suho, even though he hadn't given any specific orders. How about taking these Nagas as shadow soldiers? The Naga tribe are stupid, but they're quite useful as livestock. As expected of those who had served under Sung Jinwoo for a long time, they were knowledgeable, just like Beru. Antares also licked his lips at the sight of the corpses. Child of Shadow, did you know? Originally, the Naga tribe were cowards who hid in the deep waters because they didn't want to become prey for our dragons. Prey? Yes, they're the perfect prey with plenty of meat. Gulp. Antares, who had been licking his lips and drooling while explaining about the Nagas, declared confidently, I, the King of Dragons, the Monarch of Destruction, Antares, hereby declare, I will devour all of them. That might increase the mana of this pathetic Ragnar a little. Sure, go ahead. Suho readily agreed. After extracting them as shadow soldiers, he didn't care about the magical beast corpses anyway. Of course, he could sell them on the market for a high price, but increasing Ragnar's mana was much more beneficial to him than money. Shadow extraction is possible on this target. Shadow extraction is possible on this target. Arise. At Suho's command, the shadows of the giant Nagas swirled and rose all at once. Gasp! What? Ryo Singh and Jackson collapsed, their legs giving way at the awe-inspiring sight. The giant magical beasts they thought were killed had risen from death. Although their sizes were slightly smaller than before, their appearances, with black steam billowing from their bodies, were truly demonic. But ignoring their shocked reactions, Suho chose the strongest one among them and stored it as a shadow soldier under his command. Please name the soldier. As usual, a message appeared, asking him to name the soldier. Naga. Let's call him Gordon. Confirm? Yes. Suho casually named him Gordon. With this, a powerful giant Naga was added to Suho's shadow army, but he had a bigger concern, the job change quest. He had gained a whopping 4 levels from hunting this Naga pack, and as a result 7. Suho glanced at his status window and smiled faintly, focusing on what was ahead. This place is much better than I thought, huh? Be careful of the Dragonians. It seems, Antares advised Suho with a stern gaze. Beep! Ragnar was back. The King of Dragons, the Monarch of Destruction, covers his face in frustration. The King of Dragons, the Monarch of Destruction, nags Ragnar about having to eat those Nagas. Chapter 204. Chapter 203. After all the battles ended, Suho moved with Ryo Singh, ordering the Shadow Naga Gordon to bring Jackson's horribly crumpled truck. And as Greed had said, stupid but useful livestock lightly carried the truck loaded with Korean weapons, his lower body, shaped like a sea serpent, wriggling as he followed Suho. More magical beasts continued to appear along the way, but they were no match for the Shadow Nagas, extracted as daily mercenaries, who swarmed them. As they continued to move through the Loktak field, Suho listened to Ryo Singh's explanation about this place. What? Suho's expression hardened. He had recklessly used shadow exchange to come to India, but after hearing the full explanation, the situation in this country was far more serious than he had imagined. In short, this was all due to the geopolitical characteristics of Manipur, where the Loktak field dungeon appeared. Manipur, located in the northeastern part of India. This land was awkwardly positioned, bordering countless countries like Myanmar, Bangladesh, and China. Due to these geopolitical characteristics, this land had historically been plagued by countless serious conflicts. The reasons for the conflicts varied, ranging from political and religious disputes to tribal wars. But the problem is that several dungeon breaks occurred simultaneously around here, making the field-type dungeon too vast. Could it be that the field's range crossed the national borders? That's right, to understand it so quickly, as expected of Suho. The situation in Korea is similar. North Korea is always a headache for us. Despite Ryo Singh's admiring reaction, Suho only wore a bitter expression. If left unattended, field-type dungeons had the characteristic of gradually expanding their territory as the blue mist spread. Of course, with proper management, they usually didn't spread beyond a certain range, but things were different when several dungeons overlapped in one area. The prime example was North Korea. North Korea had turned into a supermassive monster field just as the cataclysm began. If left alone, the field would continue to expand, eventually crossing the border into China. The magical beasts of North Korea would invade China. If that happened, the situation would inevitably escalate into a political issue with China. That's right. If our country fails to eliminate the magical beasts in time and causes damage to neighboring countries, it becomes a serious problem. Compensation for damages is one thing, but the bigger problem is there would be no way to stop hunter guilds from other countries crossing the border to hunt those magical beasts. Exactly. A war could break out. Ryo Singh and Jackson nodded with serious expressions at Suho's words. Hunter guilds, with their numerous awakened members, were no different from armed forces. No, in terms of combat power, they were far more powerful and dangerous than soldiers. It's worse than war in itself. The moment they barge into the National Assembly and wreak havoc, that country is essentially conquered. In the end, to prevent such a situation, Chairman Woo Jinchul was doing everything in his power to purify North Korea, even at this moment. Wait. Suddenly, while talking with Ryo Singh, Suho thought of the most basic problem and looked around. Loktak Lake, a famous tourist attraction in India. As famous as it was, the scenery here was truly beautiful. But anyone who knew the true nature of the blue mist that blended naturally into this beautiful scenery would be horrified. If ordinary people, not awakened ones, inhaled the blue mist, their bodies would burn, and they would go berserk, turning into mist burns. Ryo, how many people live in this land? 3 million. Oh dear. Suho's expression grew even more serious at the immediate answer. There's no way all 3 million people are awakened, so you're saying they all turned into mist burns? That's not it. Actually, that's what I was most worried about at first, but thankfully, it doesn't seem to be the case. Saying that, Ryo Singh showed Suho the Asura Guild emblem hanging around his neck. Isn't that a stardust necklace? Suho's eyes widened. No, it was too big to be called a stardust necklace, and slightly smaller than the star pieces embedded in Greed and Sung Il-wan's bodies. If he had to name it, Star Piece Necklace seemed appropriate. Suho snatched Ryo Singh's Star Piece Necklace and asked, "Where did you get this?" "It's an employee ID that proves I belong to the Asura Guild. They started using it recently, and I looked into it separately, and there's a reason why this necklace became our guild's symbol. Look at this." Ryo Singh took out a new necklace from his pocket and showed it to Suho. This time, the gem was smaller, similar to the Stardust necklace distributed in Korea. "This necklace is called Stardust. Our guild is distributing it to Indians for free." Stardust necklaces? Why? They say that if an ordinary person carries this necklace, they won't turn into a mist burn, even if they inhale the blue mist. The Asura Guild was the most famous large-scale guild in India, always dedicated to protecting its people. Its leader, Siddharth Bachchan, was an S-rank hunter who had a positive influence and was respected by Indians. And Stardust was known to be an item personally developed by Siddharth Bachchan for the common people of India. When a dungeon break occurred in an area, not everyone could suddenly leave their homes, especially the poor, who had nowhere to go after leaving the land they had lived on for a long time. But they couldn't stay either. If they remained too long in the land where the blue mist spread, they would eventually turn into mist burns and die. That's when Stardust was developed. People are actually living here. A while later, Suho and his party found one of the small villages scattered within the Loktak field. And as Ryo Singh said, they were dumbfounded to see countless ordinary people still living there. They were all wearing Stardust necklaces. Little monarch, it seems the outer gods cult has infiltrated this country much faster. I guess so. At this rate, it will become India's national religion. Greed and Iron, the former high priest and priest, peeked out from beside Suho and added their comments. If you wear a Stardust necklace for a long time, you instinctively develop faith in Itarim. Of course, it's not true religious faith, but more like mental contamination by the power of a higher being. To think they distribute this to the entire nation, the priests in India are much more driven than the priests in Korea. Are you impressed? Both of you, get down. Yes. Huh? I didn't say anything. Yes, I'll get down. Greed and Iron hurriedly prostrated themselves on the ground at Suho's words. But what was strange was that the villagers didn't react at all to the sight of the shadow soldiers. Normally, they would be surprised or murmur amongst themselves, but the fact that they were all expressionless and just doing their own work felt quite eerie. Even though there were corpses scattered throughout the village, suggesting a magical beast attack at some point, no one seemed to care. Suho, the staff in our office, all had that same expression. Could this be a side effect of wearing stardust? It seems so. Ryo Singh, who had heard about the stardust necklace incident in Korea, had a grim expression. The thought that this atmosphere could spread throughout India was horrifying. Suho, looking around the village, decided to find the leader who caused this situation without hesitation. Ryo, let's first find the village where your guildmaster, Siddharth Bachchan, is. If he's an apostle of Itarim, giving him the spring water from the Echo Forest might resolve things more easily than we thought. All right, but how do we find him? No one was at the location the guild office gave us. In times like these, we need to ask the experts. Suho turned his head without hesitation and called out to the experts. Greed, Iron, yes, you called me. Can you find the location of the Void Gate? Greed and Iron began explaining competitively. As expected of the little monarch, what a wise decision. The temples of the outer gods cult are always built near dimensional rifts. So, just the gist. Void gates appear when fields generated from ordinary gates overlap. If you draw circles around the gates, the void gate will be somewhere in their intersection. Can you find it? At Suho's question, Greed and Iron's eyes gleamed with confidence. Leave it to us. We'll find it quickly if we split up with the other soldiers. Master, give me a chance too. Oh. Greed smirked at the Shadow Lancer Kui, whose eyes were burning with competitive spirit. Whatever, just get going. Screech! At Suho's command, the Shadow soldiers scattered like contestants in a race. The only one left was the Shadow Naga Gordon, who was following with the truck. Well then, let's move on to the next village. But then, shiver! Suddenly, Suho and Ryo Singh's expressions changed drastically, and their gazes turned in the same direction. Boom! Little monarch! There's a battle! A tremendous explosion erupted from the direction Greed flew in, and the ground shook as if an earthquake had occurred. Considering that this was a field teeming with magical beasts, it was a phenomenon that could occur, but the energy he felt wasn't ordinary. Beru twitched his antennae, gauging the energy of the enemy Greed was facing. At least S rank, and the energy I feel from there is... Beep. If even Ragnar was reacting, their identity was obvious. Dragonians. Bang! Suho immediately kicked off the ground and dashed forward. If it's S rank, could it be Siddharth Bachchan? But why is he with the Dragonians? Countless possibilities went through Suho's mind as he ran. But when he arrived at the scene of the battle, the situation was a bit different from what he had expected. Flash! Rumble! 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 By the time Suho arrived, a clash of immense power was already shaking the earth. At the same time, the screams of magical beasts erupted from all directions. He saw Greed fighting against a man in the center of that tremendous clash of power. A three-way battle? Rumble, rumble, rumble. But the most surprising thing was the identity of the opponent who was facing Greed, a former S-rank villain, head-on without backing down. No, he was overwhelming Greed. Interesting. An old man with white hair fluttering, emitting a tremendous aura from his entire body. A ferocious smile was plastered on his face as he clashed with Greed, an expression as if he was enjoying this battle immensely. But the language that came out of his mouth wasn't Indian. To think a mere magical beast could possess such power. It was Chinese. That's right, he wasn't Siddharth Bachchan, the national-level hunter from the previous timeline, but a completely different person. Beru, recalling his face from a distant memory, shouted his name. That's right, Lu Jigong from China. He was also a national-level hunter in his past life, a man once praised as humanity's greatest power alongside Thomas Andre. Chapter 205. Chapter 204. I have devoted my whole life to the martial arts. I have never learned to back down. Liu Jigang, a proud 6-star hunter. China does not follow the global standard hunter ranking system and uses its own unique solution. The more stars a hunter has, the more outstanding they are. A 5-star hunter was the highest rank. However, only one person, Liu Jigang, was uniquely classified outside the ranks and called a 6-star hunter. Of course, the treatment he received was on a different level than the rest of his colleagues, but no one could disagree with him being an exception. He was fully capable, and he was the true savior of the People's Republic of China, having firmly protected the country amidst the chaotic upheaval. So this time, too, I will not back down. Liu Jigang was hiding a secret that none of the people of China, which boasted a population of over 1 billion, knew. Do you think I, Liu Jigang, will be consumed by my inner demons? He had been fighting alone against the Itarim's divinity to avoid being consumed for over 2 years. It came upon him at the same time as he awakened. After becoming a hunter, it didn't take long for Liu Jigang to realize that the power given to him was different from others. Magic power, a mysterious power that suddenly arose within his body. He had heard that other hunters felt a tremendous sense of elation when they awakened, but he was different. It's still not enough. The moment his magic power arose, the sensation he felt was, surprisingly, emptiness. When a person starves for too long, they eventually stop feeling hunger. But if someone suddenly feeds that person a piece of bread, their starved stomach, triggered by it, finally realizes the terrible hunger they had forgotten. Power! I want power! Much more power! And the intense hunger that Liu Jigang felt was exactly the same sensation as experienced by Thomas Andre, who in his previous life was a national-level hunter. But unfortunately, Liu Jigang was a little less fortunate. Someone who noticed the intense hunger he craved had seemingly been waiting and came barging into his empty heart. Do you desire power? If you desire it, I shall give it to you. More power than you ever dreamed of. Liu Jigang couldn't help but be startled. It was as if the unidentified voice whispering in his ear like a devil was seeing right through his heart. Who are you? What does a name matter? What matters is that your vessel is large enough to receive me. Who? From the beginning, the voice wasn't asking for Liu Jigang's permission. At that moment, a new power from outer space suddenly began to flow into his empty vessel. At the same time, as if by magic, the hunger in his heart began to be filled. But as a rule, there is no such thing as power without a price. Therefore, submit willingly. Just like that, Liu Jigang was reborn as an apostle of Itarim at the same time as his awakening. Don't make me laugh. Even Itarim's divinity had not foreseen something. Liu Jigang was a warrior who had walked the path of martial arts his entire life. It was the stubbornness of someone who had spent his entire life upholding what he stood for at the center of his heart, different in quality from Thomas Andre, who had lived his life as a scoundrel using violence as a means. I don't believe in God. My mind is all mine. Liu Jigang, who had been embracing the power that filled his body, gritted his teeth and managed to endure the forced submission. But Itarim's divinity was not a power that could be handled by the will of a mere human. Worship. Prove your faith. Shut up! Shut up! No matter who you are, I. Gritting his teeth, Liu Jigang instinctively resisted the desire to prostrate himself before the great power and worship it. A headache that made him feel like his head was going to break. A stream of blood dripped down the corner of his clenched mouth. But at the same time, the emotions that welled up on his face were none other than humiliation and self-righteousness. Creak! I am Liu Jigang. To put it bluntly, Liu Jigang was not ultimately corrupted by Itarim's divinity. No, he was still being corrupted every moment, but to shake off that power, he abruptly rushed outside. And with the 2 longswords he had trained with all his life, he entered a dungeon and began to slay magical beasts indiscriminately. In this way, he ceaselessly expelled the power of Itarim that was constantly trying to take over his body. As a strategy to maintain his sanity, Liu Jigang found the answer in the martial arts he had practiced his entire life. Of course, not everyone can reach the state where knowing and doing are one, but he struggled desperately and succeeded. Quack! Kak! Countless magical beasts spewed blood and died in his path. Liu Zhigang reversed the direction of Itarim's power flowing into him and ceaselessly expelled it out of his body. Guild? Forces that respected and followed him? He didn't have time to care for such things. For 2 whole years, Liu Zhigang wandered restlessly across the vast expanse of China like a madman, venting Itarim's power towards the magical beasts. He did not accept the overwhelming divinity contained within, but instead repelled it outwards. He couldn't let his guard down even when he slept. Even in his dreams, he had to fight against the inner demons waiting for him to reveal a moment of weakness. A thorough single path, a relentless single-mindedness. In the process, he received the sincere respect and support of 1 billion Chinese people, and even gained the empty title of a 6-star hunter. But it didn't matter to him. His interest was solely in one thing. I will not be consumed by the inner demons trying to control my mind. Just like that, Liu Zhigang had become a monster, wandering aimlessly in search of places with many magical beasts. In particular, field-type dungeons that were dangerously neglected were the perfect battleground for him, as they allowed him to rampage freely, more so than normal dungeons entangled with numerous interests. Even if that place existed across the border in another country. There's a field that still hasn't been conquered even with Siddharth Bachchan deployed. Liu Zhigang willingly crossed the border. He entered the Loktak field, which even India's S-rank hunter had failed to conquer. Liu Zhigang has single-handedly invaded the Indian border. No, why? Naturally, the repercussions were not small. The Chinese government, well aware of his wandering tendencies, had been doing its best to prevent such an incident from happening. They had been finding the next hunting ground near him even before he finished clearing the previous one and providing him with all other conveniences. There were countless field dungeons in the vast Chinese mainland anyway, and there were plenty of places where Liu Zhigang could fight madly until all his magic power was exhausted. But this time, they couldn't stop him. Liu Zhigang has finally crossed the border. Why couldn't they stop him? They should know what it means for China's 6-star hunter to cross the border. This will turn into a diplomatic issue. Chinese public opinion was in an uproar. Many people had seen him crossing the border without permission, and the news quickly reached the Indian government. Then, Indian public opinion was also set ablaze. China's strongest hunter has invaded India? Is China planning to wage war against India? This must be a Chinese conspiracy from the start. The field where Siddharth Bachchan is located is at the end of Liu Zhigang's path. Is Liu Zhigang tired of slaughtering magical beasts and now aiming for Siddharth Bachchan? If China doesn't want war, then immediately. In truth, this situation was something no one wanted. Of course, there were a few thoughtless people in online communities who were spouting nonsense about taking this opportunity to occupy India, but they were a very small minority, especially for the Chinese government, which had tried to stop him at the border. It was frustrating to the point of madness. Liu Zhigang, that stubborn old man who had walked the path of martial arts his entire life, was simply not someone who could be persuaded. In the end, they had no choice but to upload the footage of Liu Zhigang's remarks, recorded by the border guards, onto the internet. Are your heads just for decoration? Shall I remove them myself? Shiver. At Liu Zhigang's words, the Chinese hunters, who were trying to stop him from crossing the border, turned pale and covered their necks. Loktak Field, where even Siddharth Bachchan is struggling, is gradually expanding, and right above it is our China. That's right, Liu Zhigang had his own justification. Before crossing the border, he fixed his sharp gaze on the camera pointed at him and raised his voice. Tell the people clearly. I, Liu Zhigang, am going to help Siddharth Bachchan because I am not confident in preventing the disaster that he couldn't stop. If you're not happy with that, then go catch the magical beasts yourselves. Of course, it was an obvious excuse and a pretext. Liu Zhigang just wanted to go wild in a field where even Siddharth Bachchan was struggling. This is the limit. He had endured for over 2 years, but he was getting tired. If he didn't quickly find stronger magical beasts and pour out all the wicked power that was trying to dominate his mind every moment, I'll really be consumed. And so, in the end, Liu Zhigang had encountered it. an opponent worthy of pouring all his power into. It was a wicked evil spirit with ominous black steam blazing from its entire body. Aha! There was such a strong magical beast here. I knew coming here was the right choice. My liege, this guy's gone mad. He's definitely an apostle of Itarim. Greed, who was in a fierce battle with him, shouted towards Suho, who had arrived late, and at that moment, the eyes of Liu Zhigang and Suho, who were far apart, met in the air. Liu Zhigang glared at Suho and growled ferociously. What's your relationship with this evil spirit? This is bad. At the murderous voice, Suho's expression hardened. Chapter 206. Chapter 205. Suho also knew about Liu Zhigang. China's one and only 6-star hunter. I heard he was a 7-star in his previous life. How ironic. To think he would encounter another national-level hunter while searching for Siddharth Bachchan. Moreover, it seemed that an apostle of Itarim was already dwelling within him. Suho nodded as he saw the blue mana constantly leaking from Liu Zhigang's entire body. As expected, my assumption that Itarim would have approached all of the national-level hunters was correct. Although he was surprised to encounter Liu Zhigang in an unexpected place, it was a favorable situation since it could expedite things. My liege, quickly give him the spring water from the Echo Forest. Suho immediately took out the antidote potion from his inventory. However, giving it to Liu Zhigang was the problem. Would it be possible to get through the ceaseless attacks that were being scattered all around and feed him the potion? It seemed that the method of spraying it on his body, like with Thomas Andre, would also be difficult. As expected, the best method was conversation, but the language barrier was the issue. Since Suho didn't know any Chinese, conversation with Liu Zhigang was impossible in the first place. Moreover, there were no shadow soldiers that could speak that language. Then, as expected, the method is, don't worry, I will quickly catch a passing Chinese person and devour their brain. Stop it. Suho hurriedly grabbed Beru, who was about to leave to find a snack. It would be faster to find an Indian who was proficient in Chinese than to find and eat a Chinese person in India. And there just happened to be someone capable of doing that, rushing over from over there. Suho, I'm here. Huh, Liu? Liu Zhigang? Why is China's Liu Zhigang here? Ryo Singh and Jackson, who were following a step behind Suho with the Shadow Naga Gordon, widened their eyes at the sight of Liu Zhigang. Ryo Singh, can you interpret Chinese? Of course, I am the elite of the Asura Guild. I can speak 10 languages. Keek, is that so? I understand your will, my liege. If I just eat this human's brain, everything will go smoothly. Squish, Suho's foot lightly stomped on Beru, who was licking his lips and flying towards Ryo Singh. Ryo Singh, from now on, interpret what I say to Liu Zhigang. Got it. Ryo Singh confidently nodded and shouted towards Liu Zhigang, who was fighting greed. Liu Zhigang, we are not your enemies. Boom. However, the current situation was too intense to be resolved through conversation. Kaboom! The sword energy that Liu Zhigang unleashed lightly grazed Greed's body and bisected the forest behind him. Seeing Liu Zhigang suddenly change direction and charge towards Suho, Greed gritted his teeth and chased after him. How dare you try to bypass me and aim for our liege? However, slash! At that moment, Liu Zhigang suddenly flipped his body in midair and aimed for Greed's weak point again. Boom! Greed barely blocked his attack and gritted his teeth. Their eyes shone brightly, and powerful energy clashed against each other. Smirk. A faint smile appeared on Liu Zhigang's lips as he glared at Greed. Confirmed. As expected, you guys were all in cahoots. There was no formality in Liu Zhigang's battle. The past 2 years of hardship had made him that way. A limitlessly free attack and defense where the boundaries between falsehood and truth had crumbled. That was the path of martial arts that he had reached in this life. Berserker, Butcher, Sword Demon. This was the reason why such vicious nicknames were attached to the man who was once a national-level hunter. Indeed, this is the Liu Zhigang of this timeline. A deep smile also appeared on Greed's lips. He clearly remembered the fame of Liu Zhigang from his previous life. Although it was a shame that the power of a national-level hunter, like back then, was gone, Greed himself was also considerably weaker than when he was Sung Jinwoo's soldier. I'll go at you with all I have. Kaboom! In an instant, the beautiful scenery was blown up, and an apocalyptic aftermath spread all around. Oh my god, what in the world? Is this Liu Jigong's power? Ryo Singh and Jackson were speechless in front of the tremendous spectacle. And at the same time, a question arose in their minds, namely the presence of Greed, who was fighting Liu Jigong without being pushed back at all. No way. He's on par with Liu Jigong? Moreover, it's not even Hunter Sung Suho fighting directly. How can a mere summon have such power? Especially for Ryo Singh, who knew the number of summons Suho usually wielded, the shock was beyond words. They were all scattered now, following Suho's orders, but what if all those soldiers gathered here? Does Liu Jigong even stand a chance? Ryo Singh gave up trying to imagine it. However, now was not the time to leisurely watch the fight. Their lives were in danger if they got caught up in the aftermath. Jackson, let's fall back for now. It's not a situation where conversation is possible right now. Ryo Singh and Jackson gave up on interpreting and hurriedly retreated. However, they weren't the only ones being swept away by the aftermath of the battle and panicking. Keek! Kiruk! The Dragonids, who had encountered and fought Liu Jigong a step ahead of Greed, were also caught in the crossfire. Suho, watching them, narrowed his eyes as he looked at the names floating above their heads. Variant 8? Suho left Liu Jigong to Greed for a while and focused on the unfamiliar appearance of the Dragonids, half human, half dragon. They were a race with an ambiguous appearance that was closer to humans than lizardmen. But aside from their appearance, blue mana was gushing out from the star pieces embedded throughout their bodies, just like the foreign religion cultists in the black market. Don't tell me they implanted star pieces into magical beasts as well? He was really seeing all sorts of strange things since coming to this country. It was surprising enough that unawakened citizens were living in a field-type dungeon wearing stardust necklaces, but now even magical beasts were walking around with star pieces implanted in them. Antares, do you know anything about those variants? Beep? At Suho's question, Ragnar's eyes suddenly turned stern. A displeased expression appeared on his cute face. A disgrace to dragonkind, to think such half-baked creatures were born. The emotion that appeared in Antares' eyes as he looked at the Dragonids, or rather the variants, was clear displeasure and contempt. Half-baked? Those guys weren't born through normal means. Someone must have found undeveloped dragon eggs. Undeveloped dragon eggs? My liege, could that be? In an instant, the same thought occurred to Suho and Beru as they looked at each other. Could those be the ones that my mother found before? I believe they are the dragon eggs that were empty, my liege. The numerous dragon eggs that Cha Hayin and Circa had found in the tomb of berserk dragons. They later said that except for the small egg from which Ragnar had hatched, all the rest had scattered into dust as soon as they were touched. You're saying they were hatched from those? It's not so much that they were hatched, but rather that the dragon energy contained within the eggs was extracted and injected into other races. So-called forced evolution. Antares seemed extremely displeased. No matter how much he claimed to be uninterested in anything other than destruction and ruin, it was a matter of pride that those of his own dragon race were being treated as experimental subjects by someone. How dare they? Antares' gaze towards the variants was incredibly fierce. Okay, let's figure out what's happening in this country after we deal with this mess. Harmakan. Suho nodded, then looked around at the surroundings that were being destroyed on an apocalyptic scale, his eyes gleaming. You called? The shadow mage Harmakan rose from men. He ground at Suho's call. Capture all the variants, and find out what their condition is. I will thoroughly investigate them. Swoosh! Harmakan immediately reached out towards the variants. At the same time, Suho shouted, Silad! The king of the snowfolk and the monarch of frost watches you. Suho felt the gaze of that being and boldly opened his mouth. Activate Blizzard of Frost. Whoosh! At that moment, a true apocalypse began on this land. Using skill, Blizzard of Frost. Mana required, 100 per second. The blizzard of frost that had once turned the island of Passad into a glacier had struck India. Keek! Eventually, the variants that were scattered all over the place began to freeze. Even the mighty Liu Jigong could not be free from the powerful blizzard that covered the area. Debuff, Curse of the Frost applied. Attack speed reduced by 30%, movement speed reduced by 30%. He's even more vicious than I thought. To use such a wide area skill, regardless of whether his subordinates get caught up in it. Liu Zhigong, who misunderstood that the variance, as well as greed, were in cahoots with Suho, frowned. However, his decision was swift. I'll strike the root cause of all this first. His figure immediately shot through the blizzard towards Suho. Kwang. The two horns of Vulcan, which were now in Suho's hands, clashed against Liu Zhigang's swords. My liege, Greed. Suho stopped Greed, who was approaching to help him. And Suho's eyes, meeting Liu Zhigang's directly, deepened immensely. An apostle of Itarim, was it because of the blizzard? The scene from that time was unfolding in Suho's mind right now. The moment when his mother, Cha Hain, had cut down an apostle of Itarim with a single sword strike. That beautiful and marvelous power. What about me now? Thump, thump. He was curious. Now that his level was higher than back then, could his current power reach even his mother's? Therefore, I'll go all out. Finally, Suho's power finally clashed with Liu Zhigang's. The tremendous shockwaves caused the blizzard of frost to flutter mercilessly, shaking the whole world. And all this time, the Dragon Emperor Antares silently watched Suho with a cold gaze, from beginning to end, without taking his eyes off him even once. Smirk. Well, he's not bad for a brat. Finally, a faint smile appeared on his lips. The wind stopped. Chapter 207. Chapter 206. The land where the blizzard had melted away. In the center of a massive crater, Liu Zhigang sat slumped, his limbs limp. His body was completely exhausted, but the faint smile at the corners of his mouth made him look incredibly relieved. How refreshing. Finally, the inner demon was gone. It was the result of draining the ominous mana that had been tormenting him for the past 2 years. Of course, it could be a temporary phenomenon, but just getting rid of the headache for once made him feel like he was flying. Yes, I should have fought an S rank from the beginning. Until now, due to various political reasons, Liu Zhigang battling against someone from China would be a national loss, and picking a fight with an S rank from another country would be a war in itself. But today, he was truly lucky. To think I would encounter an S rank villain in a place like this. Although I lost. Cough. Suddenly, red blood spurted from Liu Zhigang's mouth. Of course, it would be a lie to say he had no regrets. There were many. If I had known it would be like this, I should have saved some of my strength. If I had fought again when I was in top condition, the result might have been a little different. Of course, if I had done that, I wouldn't have been able to shake off all the inner demons like now. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind like a revolving lantern in just one breath. But one thing was certain, he was still alive enough to indulge in such extravagant emotions. You showed mercy with your sword. Suddenly, Liu Zhigang's weary eyes found Suho's, who was looking down at him. Why didn't you kill me? Were you not a villain after all? Suho fully accepted his straightforward gaze and spoke to Ryo Singh, who was approaching from behind. Ryo Singh, interpret. Yeah, he says thank you for sparing his life. That's short. Suho momentarily gave Ryo Singh a dubious look at his interpretation skills, but even after receiving that look, Ryo Singh just nodded with a confident expression. Suho, you are amazing as expected. To think you're strong enough to defeat Liu Zhigang single-handedly. I won easily because he was exhausted from the beginning. Excessive modesty is deceit. Suho, make sure to get re-evaluated when you return to Korea this time. For the man who defeated Liu Zhigang to be only C rank, that's a huge disrespect to him as well. Even as he spoke, Ryo Singh had a relieved expression. It was only today that he could finally be sure that Suho was a growing hunter. If the world finds out about this, they'll be shocked. Should I take this opportunity to change guilds? Of course, Suho wouldn't refuse an elite like me, and if I join now, I could at least become vice president soon. Leaving Ryo Singh, who was seriously contemplating his future, alone, Suho approached Liu Zhigang with the spring water of the Echo Forest. What is this? Gulp, gulp! Liu Zhigang, who was completely exhausted, had no choice but to obediently accept and drink the unknown potion, and its effect appeared immediately. Whoosh! Liu Zhigang couldn't help but be startled when he suddenly saw a pair of blue wings spread out from his back. The true form of the inner demon that had been tormenting him all this time was finally revealed. Ka! Soon, the ashen angel with outstretched blue wings let out a painful scream and separated from his back. However, the energy he felt from it was quite different from that of Thomas Andre. The ashen angel, exhausted of all its strength, just like Liu Jigang, desperately flapped its wings to escape from this place. Keek, my liege, we can't let it get away. Crack! Before Beru could even finish speaking, as if waiting for this moment, Suho's hand instantly snapped the creature's neck. Ding! You have defeated an apostle of Itarim. Level up. Level up. All right. With the messages popping up in succession, Suho, who had been quite exhausted, was completely restored to his perfect condition. However, the situation was the same for Liu Jigang. The dust of light from the shattering of the ashen angel's body seeped back into Liu Jigang. In an instant, his eyes filled with astonishment. What are these memories? The remnants of the apostle of Itarim, which had melted into Liu Jigang's body that had been rejecting Itarim's power for the past 2 years, awakened something. 2 lives. 2 sets of memories. The shock that came from the process of them colliding in Liu Jigang's mind was indescribable. However, so that's how it was. He accepted it quickly. The shock was great, but the relief that followed was even greater. Soon, a truly refreshing laugh escaped his lips. Yes, as expected, I was stronger than I am now. It wasn't a vain ambition. China's one and only 7-star hunter. The national-level hunter who had crossed the sea to China and torn apart the giant magical beast. That was me, Liu Jigang, he muttered with a blank expression. I understand why the inner demon came to me, because I had such power and then lost it. Having identified the cause, his heart felt at ease, and he seemed to know what he had to do. All that remains is to strive forward. Of course, he knew that one's power as a hunter doesn't grow just by training. However, feeling the remnants of the inner demon that had just saturated his body, he had a vague feeling that he might be able to reach a level similar to that time. Would you mind helping me up? Liu Jigang reached out his hand towards Suho. Although they didn't speak the same language, he understood his intention and readily grabbed his hand to help him up. Interpreter, would you please translate my words to this young man? At Liu Jigang's request, Ryo Singh nodded with a determined look. He wasn't offended that he, a core member of the Asura Guild, was being treated like a mere interpreter. Rather, he felt there was no greater honor. This is the first conversation between China's Liu Jigang and the man who defeated him single-handedly. This historic moment is being facilitated entirely through my mediation. The conversation that these two would have from now on might even be written in history books. Ryo Singh swallowed hard and focused his eyes and ears as if determined not to miss a single word. Meanwhile, Liu Jigang stared intently at Suho's face, then chuckled. Now that I see him again, I understand how this young man could be so strong. Now that he looked carefully, didn't he resemble someone a lot? Having suddenly recalled his past life, Liu Jigang had a lot of questions to ask, but he decided to ask the most curious and important one first. I'll ask, where is your father and what is he doing now? Ryo Singh, interpret. Suho, don't misunderstand and listen. What? Gulp. Ryo Singh interpreted Liu Jigang's words with a more serious and desperate expression than ever. Liu Jigang is suddenly asking about your father's well-being, which is grammatically a very serious insult in Korea, but in China, it could be a truly pure expression of concern. Ryo Singh, whose Korean skills had been endlessly improving these days, he was indeed worthy of being a core member of the Asura Guild. Indeed, I understand. Liu Jigang nodded seriously after a long conversation with Suho. There was a minor incident where the interpreter was startled to hear that time had been reversed, but that too wasn't hard to understand if it was considered a special skill. More important was the current situation. In any case, you're saying there's a high probability that Siddharth Bachchan, like me, has fallen to the inner demon. To be precise, it was different from an inner demon, but the expression didn't matter. The important thing was that no matter how he looked at it, Siddharth Bachchan didn't seem like he would struggle to shake off the inner demon like himself. In the first place, we national-level hunters were comrades who fought together against the formidable enemy, Kamish. There were some guys we couldn't get along with, a cause of personality differences, but we basically knew what kind of people they were. Liu Jigong continued with a wry smile. Especially among them, Thomas Andre and I were known throughout the world as hotheads. Well, that was when we were full of youthful vigor. Ah, I can't say that's not the case now. Liu Jigong and Thomas Andre were those who were praised as humanity's strongest forces in the past, and as such, their personalities were also quite aggressive. But Siddharth Bachchan, unlike us, he's a virtuous person. Virtuous? At Suho's question, Liu Jigong nodded. Yes, hypocrisy is also a form of virtue. Hypocrisy? Hypocrisy. Our guild leader isn't that kind of, is he? Ryo Singh, who was interpreting, momentarily flared up, but then suddenly lost his confidence. He suddenly recalled the smiling face of the man who had demoted him, his capable and loyal subordinate. Well, I guess most humans are similar. When they gain too much wealth and fame, they become intoxicated and lose themselves, and it's the same with power. Liu Jigong smiled bitterly and recalled the countless hunters he had seen throughout his past and present lives. And among them, Siddharth Bachchan. How should I put it? He was a guy afflicted with savior complex. Savior complex? Yes, he kept saying that with great power comes great responsibility, and he wanted to help people. He calls it a good influence, but at its core, it's a desire for fame. At the following scathing assessment, the expression of Ryo Singh, who was in charge of interpretation, became a bit complicated. Siddharth Bachchan, the head of the Asura Guild and a representative hero of India. In reality, he was known as a virtuous person who worked harder than anyone else to help the common people. But Ryo Singh, who had once served as his aide, was also someone who knew a little more about him than others. That guy, wanting to rise higher himself, wants to save other people's lives, but without caring about the will of the people involved. And as soon as he finished speaking, Master, after examining the variants, Harmakan, who had approached Suho, pointed at the variants he had captured and reported what he had learned. No matter how I look at it, it seems they were all once human. What? Suho's eyes widened at those words, and he looked at the variants. Those guys are human? Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. They are hybrids created by injecting dragon blood into living humans using star Pisces as a medium. Suho realized what the hypocrite Siddharth Bachchan was doing in this land right now. It seems he is trying to forcibly awaken humans who have not awakened. The variants, humans whose rationality had collapsed and had fallen into becoming mere magical beasts, were screaming miserably, begging to be killed. Chapter 208, Chapter 207. Suho's expression hardened. Right now, the population of Manipur was a staggering 3 million. At first, he was worried that all of them would turn into mistburns and die, but it turned out that the problem was even more serious. In the worst-case scenario, all 3 million could turn into variants. Either way, the loss of 3 million people is the same. However, the problem was that, unlike the mistburns, which disappear over time, the variants could leave this dungeon and spread the damage. Moreover, even though they were half-baked, the danger of the dragonids was not comparable to mere mistburns. If all of this was really Siddharth Bachchan's plan, it was truly a terrible thing. He had to stop it. Harmakan, is there any way to turn them back into humans? Unfortunately, it's impossible. Antares, what about you? At Suho's question, Antares also shook his head firmly. Impossible. In the first place, dragon blood was injected into races other than dragons. It's a wonder their bodies haven't been destroyed yet. That's right. It seems that the star fragments implanted in their bodies are forcibly preventing the fatal side effects. The tremendous pain from that process is what caused their sanity to collapse, even at this very moment. Listening to their explanation, Suho's gaze silently turned to the variants who were screaming, bound by Harmakan's magic. My liege, the only thing we can do is to kill them as quickly as possible. Only death can save them. At Beru's words, Suho silently nodded. At that moment, Harmakan's magic destroyed the star pieces embedded in the variants' bodies. Crack! 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 The moment the blue jewels shattered and scattered everywhere, the variants collapsed on the spot with a death rattle. Crackle! Variant 8 has been defeated. 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 There were no additional level-ups. However, Suho was looking down at the fragmented corpses of the variants with a more terrifying expression than ever. Shadow extraction is possible on this target. Shadow extraction is possible on this target. Should he consider this fortunate? Although their lives were defiled by others, their souls were not contaminated. After a moment of contemplation, Suho reached out his hand towards their shadows. I'll give you a chance. If you want to take revenge with your own hands, arise. At that single word, the wails of the pitiful souls who had fallen into becoming variants began to echo and resound in the air. Ooh-wah! Liu Jigong's eyes widened at the sight. If it had been before his memories of his past life returned, he would have mistaken it for the power of an ominous evil spirit again. But now it was different. Did he inherit his father's skill? The skill of Sung Jinwoo, whom he had always paid attention to in his past life, was being used right before his eyes. Swoosh! Soon, countless shadow soldiers rose before Liu Jigong's eyes. Shadow soldier. The souls that had escaped the name of variants through death solemnly knelt before Suho and bowed their heads. Guide me. Suho's chilling voice reached their ears. To where those who made you this way are. The shadow soldiers, trembling at his eerie rage, raised their heads again and resolutely rose. Hot tears were flowing from their eyes, endlessly. Imphal. The capital and the largest city of Manipur was an area where traditional Indian buildings and modern residential facilities coexisted. Along with the beautiful natural scenery of Loktak Lake in the distance, it was a complex city where extremely modern multi-story apartments and commercial buildings were mixed together in a disorderly fashion. Although this place now belonged to the Loktak field, many people were still living here in a way not much different from before. Master, are you just going to sit back and watch like this? What is it, man? I'm talking about the Asura Guild. No matter what the situation is, this city is clearly under the jurisdiction of our Imphal Guild. So, what can we do? Ali Hassan, the guildmaster of the Imphal Guild, muttered as he clenched the cigarette in his mouth at the vice-master's words. You know it too. If it weren't for Stardust, this city would have been ruined long ago. Ruined? If it weren't for Stardust, everyone would have migrated to other cities long ago. That's ruined in its own way, man, of course, for us. It's no different from being ruined now anyway. Shut up. Ali Hassan, who dismissed the vice-master's words, also had a frown on his face. That's right. Currently, the Imphal Guild had its entire jurisdiction stolen by a large guild called the Asura Guild. Although it was certainly an unpleasant situation, he had to admit what he had to admit. Stardust distributed by them, that mysterious necklace, was a great item that prevented civilians from turning into mist burns even if they inhaled the blue mist. It was an undeniable truth that thanks to Stardust, the people of Imphal were still able to live their daily lives in this city. However, but still, something feels strange. See? Guildmaster, you think so too, right? Ali Hassan silently gazed out the window, the city more desolate than before. The blue mist faintly spread over it. The atmosphere outside the Imphal Guild building was definitely different from before. Thanks to Stardust, people were able to go about their daily lives as before. But why was this city becoming more and more deserted day by day? Like a ghost town appearing in a third-rate horror movie. And one more thing. Why aren't those Asura guys conquering this dungeon yet? That's exactly what I'm saying. They managed to conquer one at the beginning, but since then, it feels like they're just dragging their feet. Siddharth Bachchan, the guildmaster of the Asura Guild, was a renowned powerhouse even in India. Despite him taking the lead, the Loktak field, including Imphal, was still shrouded in blue mist. If they were going to drag it out like this, it would have been much better if they had let our guild conquer it from the beginning. I know, you have a point, so shut up. Sigh, I'm sorry. In the first place, this is our jurisdiction. It's frustrating to just watch with the gate right in front of us. Ali Hassan silently spat his cigarette on the floor and crushed it with his foot. Do you think I'm not frustrated? Well, this could be considered a kind of tyranny of a large corporation. The Asura Guild had boldly taken away all the conquering rights from the Imphal Guild under the pretext of protecting the citizens, and the Imphal Guild couldn't protest at all. All 3 million citizens whose lives were saved thanks to Stardust welcomed the intervention of the Asura Guild with open arms. As a result, the Imphal Guild was now reduced to this state of idleness. Of course, it wasn't like they had absolutely nothing to do. In any case, since this entire area had turned into a den of magical beasts, the current mission of the Imphal Guild was to stand guard to prevent the magical beasts from approaching people. But until when? In the end, unless someone entered the gate and conquered the dungeon, the city of Imphal would never escape from being a field-type dungeon. Yes, in other words, this city will have to live under the care of the Asura Guild forever. It's not even a city-state, It was then. Guildmaster! Suddenly, there was a small commotion outside the building, and a staff member hurriedly opened the door to the president's office. Something terrible has happened. I think you need to come out and see. Why? Did another horde of magical beasts appear? Even as he spoke, Hassan tilted his head. If a horde of magical beasts had appeared, he should have felt their unique bloodlust early on. But there was no such sign, and the expression of the staff member who came to find him was also somewhat subtle. What in the world? Bang! At that moment, the door the staff member had entered through was violently shattered, and someone entered the president's office. Who is it? Who's this guy? Startled, Ali Hassan and the vice guildmaster instantly took up a fighting stance and glared at the intruder who had barged in unannounced. A villain or a gang? Whatever it was absurd. No matter how much the Imphal Guild's reputation had declined, what kind of crazy people would dare to break into a hunter guild? But then, something was strange. The intruder who had barged into the Imphal Guild tilted his head after checking the identities of those in the president's office. Is this the right place? These guys don't seem to be from the foreign religion. What, you bastard? What language is that? As an unfamiliar language flowed from the intruder's mouth, Ali Hassan was wary of him, and at the same time glanced at the vice guildmaster. I don't know that language either. He hurriedly shook his head. But if your head isn't good, it's your body that has to do the work. The vice guildmaster jumped out towards the intruder with a fierce expression. I'll subdue him first, and then call an interpreter. Who the hell is this guy, daring to break into our guild? Wait! Ali Hassan hurriedly reached out his hand to stop him, but it was too late. Bang! Ugh! He closed his eyes and sighed at the sight of the vice guildmaster, who had bravely jumped out, being helplessly thrown back and crashing into the wall. You should pick your fights. Who could he blame? It was the vice guildmaster's fault for lacking the ability to read the opponent's strength. Gulp. Ali Hassan swallowed hard and calmly raised his magic power throughout his body. However, ignorance is bliss, and you can only see as much as you know. He couldn't bring himself to run forward like his pathetically fainted friend. Strong. So strong that I can't even gauge it. Could he be S-rank? As the president of a guild, Ali Hassan had met S-rank hunters several times before, but he could confidently say that there was no one like this among the S-ranks he knew. Who the hell is he? Suddenly. What? These guys aren't even wearing necklaces. Is this really the right place? Another intruder poked his head into the president's office and came inside. A white-haired old man speaking Chinese. The moment Ali Hassan saw his face, his eyes couldn't help but widen. Li Liu Jigang? There was no hunter who didn't know Liu Jigang's face. China's one and only 6-star hunter. A wanderer who always roamed around looking for battlefields despite possessing such overwhelming power. Why did the great Liu Jigang suddenly appear in this city? But there was something that confused Ali Hassan even more. So what are you going to do now? Liu Jigang, the fearsome sword demon whom even the Chinese government couldn't dare to stop, was politely speaking to the young man who had entered first, like a gentle lamb. Ali Hassan couldn't help but be shocked at the sight. Who the hell is that guy? Chapter 209. Chapter 208. Ali Hassan, 30 years old. He was originally a beggar who lived in the back alleys of Imphal, but his life took a 180-degree turn when he suddenly awakened as a B-rank hunter during the Cataclysm. He was now Ali Hassan, the guildmaster of the Imphal Guild, representing Imphal, where he was born and raised. Of course, he still sometimes had nightmares about his days as a beggar, But Ali Hassan enjoyed the happiness of waking up to a reality that was as good as a lie. But why was it? Even though he spent all this terrible time as a beggar, he still had a feeling that today would be the longest day of his life. Ryo Singh, I need your interpretation. As if waiting for Suho's call, Ryo Singh peeked out from behind. Like a skilled salesman, he approached Ali Hassan and handed him his business card. Namaste. Thank you for your hard work. Please don't be too alarmed. This is who I am. Asura Guild. Are you from the Asura Guild? Hassan's eyes widened as he checked the card. The name Asura Guild, which had occupied Imphal, was clearly engraved in the middle. This business card, which had been the pride and glory of his family, supporting Ryo Singh firmly all this time, was rip, torn to shreds. Haha, this thing doesn't matter anymore. Just remember my name. Ryo Singh had casually torn his business card, which he had habitually handed out, into 4 pieces. The reason was, of course, that he had successfully changed jobs. Having finally obtained Suho's permission on the way here, Ryo Singh greeted them with his hands clasped together like a dignified yet humble celebrity. Let me introduce myself again. My name is Ryo Singh, former A-rank hunter of the Asura Guild and current interpreter and new employee of the Woojin Guild. I'm expected to become vice president soon, though. Woojin Guild? Is there such a guild? The hunters of the Imphal Guild murmured at those words. At least in India, it was a name they had never heard of. Ah, of course you wouldn't know. Our Woojin Guild is from Korea. Ryo Singh naturally added an explanation. Korea? Yes. As you can see, it's the strongest guild in Korea. Strongest in Korea? Along with the last explanation, Ryo Singh's gaze briefly turned to Liu Zhigang, who was standing behind them with his arms crossed nonchalantly, a deliberate gesture. And that intention was very successful. Wait, could it be? The moment Hassan's gaze, which had been lost until now, turned to Liu Zhigang, a strong sense of alarm arose in his mind. Then that crazy old man. No, Mr. Liu Zhigang is also from the Woojin Guild. Shh, that part is confidential, so I don't think I can mention it. You understand what I mean, Guildmaster, right? Haha. Gasp! The way Ryo Singh winked with one eye implied a lot. Hassan, who had guessed what the confidential information was, couldn't help but cover his mouth with both hands and tremble. Really? Liu Zhigang joined a guild? And it's a guild from another country? Oh my God. It felt like he had stumbled upon a truly tremendous secret. Who was that crazy old man? Sword Demon Liu Zhigang. He was China's pride, the one and only 6-star hunter, receiving the utmost favoritism from the government. For that man to suddenly join a specific guild, and a foreign one at that, does the Chinese government even know about this? No, that couldn't be. No country, let alone China, would just sit back and watch as their representative hunter was taken away by another nation. Wait, that's not what's important right now. Suddenly realizing an even more shocking fact, Ali Hassan's gaze hurriedly turned towards Suho. Then that means this young man took Liu Zhigang as his subordinate? Who the hell is this hunter? Suho was just bewildered by Hassan's reaction, who looked like he had seen a ghost. However, Liu Zhigang, who could manage simple Arabic conversation, looked at Ryo Singh with a displeased expression from behind. Hey, when did I say I would join the Woojin Guild? Oh, sir. Shh. Ahaha. When did I say such a thing? But if you don't mind, wouldn't it be easier to work this way? Liu Zhigang clicked his tongue at Ryo Singh's attitude of openly exploiting his reputation. You're a sly fellow. You'd be better suited as a politician than a hunter. Haha, thank you for the compliment. You're saying I'm that good at my job. No, the opposite. If you're going to use my name, you're doing it wrong. Huh? Liu Zhigang, who had been quietly observing the situation, suddenly unfolded his arms and stepped forward. Then his presence began to grow. All the hunters of the Imphal Guild, including Hassan, trembled as they looked up at Liu Zhigang, feeling as if they were facing a giant. Liu Zhigang, accustomed to such treatment, gave them an arrogant smile and ordered. I, Liu Zhigang, will ask. Those who don't want to answer, step forward now. However, there will be consequences for that audacity. What was it? The moment he heard those words, a chill ran down Ryo Singh's spine. That's right, he had forgotten for a moment. The true meaning of the name Liu Zhigang. He was, not only in terms of combat power, but also his unique, difficult personality, on par with Thomas Andre. The fact was that no one, including the Chinese government, could dare to stop him once he set his mind on something, and now a solemn command, akin to a death sentence, fell from his lips. From now on, confess everything you have done in this land, if there is any falsehood in your words. But Liu Jigong wasn't alone here. Suddenly, he stopped speaking and glanced at Suho's face beside him. Then, he turned his head again to look ahead and gave a meaningful smile. No, it doesn't matter if you lie. You will eventually tell the truth even after you die. Chills. The hunters' backs were drenched in cold sweat from the murderous intent hidden beneath Liu Jigong's sincerity. They saw it too. Suho, whom Liu Jigong had briefly glanced at, the long, black shadow following his feet. Ah! From the deep abyss beyond, ominous black specters were looking at them, shedding mournful tears. I thought Siddharth Bachchan would be waiting, but to think they weren't even associated with the Outer Gods cult. After interrogating Ali Hassan, Suho was able to learn various information about the Asura Guild. It seems they are all just ignorant errand boys. The shadow soldiers Suho had gathered were the victims who had been experimented on as Variant 8 here. So guided by them, he had stormed this place, but unexpectedly, the Imphal Guild turned out to be just an ordinary place. The Asura Guild has been using all the small guilds operating in Imphal as their pawns. To be precise, they are like subcontractors, but in reality, they are just unpaid errand boys. Since they have the noble cause of protecting the city, we have no choice but to follow their orders. And the most common thing that the Imphal Guild had done under the orders of the Asura Guild was to distribute stardust, or more precisely, the Stardust Necklace, to the citizens of the city. The reason was, of course, that there were way too many citizens, so it wasn't profitable for the expensive members of the Asura Guild to move directly, so they used all the hunters in this area as their pawns. However, there was one other thing, something strange. But, among the members of the Imphal Guild who were competing to answer all of Suho's questions cautiously, Ali Hassan carefully opened his mouth. No matter how I look at it, I don't think Stardust is 100% effective. What do you mean? Since I'm originally from the streets, I'm quite familiar with the slums, but a significant number of the beggars who received Stardust have begun to disappear some time ago. Suho's eyes gleamed coldly at those words. People have gone missing? Yes. Of course, the city hall is rather happy when beggars disappear, but I was a little concerned. I wondered if there might be some unknown side effects to Stardust. Ali Hassan, who was rambling on with his ants, suddenly felt a strange gaze. For some reason, the black specters who had been staring at him from Suho's shadow looked strangely familiar. Must be my imagination, right? But Suho thought differently. The shadow soldiers couldn't speak because of their low rank, but he noticed what their gazes meant. Did they secretly kidnap the poor and experiment on them? And the reason they guided me here? It seems it's because he is from the same slums and is the only one they can trust. Conversely, does that mean the other guilds subcontracted by the Asura Guild cannot be trusted? Having thought this far, Suho nodded and immediately rose from his seat. Yes, let's start here then. He looked at Liu Jigong and Ryo Singh, who were waiting for his decision, and said, "It seems we need to figure out exactly what the Asura Guild's plan is before we meet Siddharth Bachchan." "You mean, we're going to hit all the hunter guilds operating in Imphal?" Smirk. At those words, Liu Jigong cracked his knuckles and gave a vicious smile. "Well, then we can each move separately. Can I kill them if they resist?" "I'll leave that to your judgment, but leave the bodies behind." "All right." Ryo Singh quietly swallowed hard at the sight of the two men exchanging glances with his interpretation in between. And so today, two nightmares were unleashed on the city of Imphal. It's raining. A small boy who stepped into the shady alleyways of Imphal, filled with humid air, looked up at the sky and exhaled with a gasp. His clothes were getting wet from the damp rainwater, but he had no thought or energy to avoid it. No, rather, it was good. There was no better boon for someone being chased. The rainwater will wash away the smell of my blood. He had lived his whole life cursing God, but at least at this moment gratitude came naturally. I need to get as far away as possible. The boy forced his limp body up. The pain from his wounds brought tears to his eyes, but he gritted his teeth and held back his cries. "God, please." The boy forced back his tears and prayed more desperately than ever. Please help me. No, anyone would do. Please. Save me. And so the boy limped and slowly disappeared into the dark alleyway. But soon after, splash! Hideous, reptile-like feet stepped into the puddles of rainwater in the alleyway. They sniffed the air and looked around, then muttered quietly. The trail ends here. He's lucky. The rain has diluted the smell of blood. Rumble. Just then, lightning flashed, briefly revealing their faces hidden under their hoods. Lizardmen. No, rather, hybrids that somewhat resembled humans. The corners of their mouths stretched wide, and they licked their lips with their hideous tongues. He can't have gone far. Find him. Found. What? Following the sudden voice, their heads involuntarily turned back. And there, an extremely wicked black shadow, cast along the wall of the dark alleyway, was smiling at them with its mouth wide open. Chapter 210. Chapter 209. Someone once said, the greatest luxury is giving. In that sense, Ali Hassan was quite a lavish person. He, a beggar who grew up in the slums, continued to visit them whenever he had the chance, even after awakening. Wahaha! I'm back again, you bastards. He didn't go empty-handed. Every time he went, he filled a truck full of bread. And he showed off to the beggars who looked up to him, scattering the food from the truck in all directions. Hey, did you see that? This is how much I have. Take this and eat, you bastards. Uhaha! Good deeds? Noblesse oblige? He had never learned such difficult words. He just wanted to show off. Yes, that was the only reason he started this. These pieces of bread, even if he flexed a few trucks, were nothing compared to the money a hunter earned in a dungeon. But no matter how much he showed off, there was one thing Hassan never did. He would give food, but not money. If I did that, there would only be a scramble to snatch it from each other, and thugs from other neighborhoods would flock here after hearing the rumors. So, just barely enough to keep their stomachs from growling. Just enough so that the hunger of tomorrow wouldn't be scary tonight. Hassan, who knew the ways of the slums better than anyone, knew the right balance very well. But why was it? From some time ago, the number of people in the slums began to decrease. There was more and more bread left over. By the time Hassan noticed this fact, a significant number of beggars had already disappeared. I couldn't confirm whether they had truly disappeared, or if they were unfortunately eaten by magical beasts wandering the back alleys. But now I think I know the reason. Crack. Grrr. Hassan, who was explaining with Ryo Singh interpreting, swallowed hard and looked ahead. In front of him, the beaten-up dragonids were lying face down in the mud. They were the ones Beru had found in the back alleys of the slums. Suho stepped on their heads and said with a chilling gaze, I'll ask once. Who are you? Grrr. Their reptilian eyes glanced at him with a servile expression. Their appearance was a mixture of lizard and human. Large star fragments were implanted in their bodies. Without the need for an answer, their names were already visible in Suho's sight. Variant 13. They can talk at around number 13. As expected, the experiment is ongoing. Tsk. At Suho's words, Antares, who was perched on his shoulder, clicked his tongue with a displeased expression. Seeing these guys made it even more certain. The king of beasts, the Fang monarch, frowns as he recalls the humans who became werewolves by drinking Grey's blood. Yes, it's a similar situation to back then. Crack! Suho put more force on his foot that was stepping on the variants' heads and asked them, Ryo Singh, interpret, are you guys from the Outer Gods cult? Grrr! I don't know. Where did you take the people you captured? I don't know. We don't know anything. Blue malice flowed from their vicious, snarling eyes. Iron, the former priest of the Outer Gods cult, and Greed, the former high priest, recognized it and advised Suho. They are already completely possessed by the star pieces. At this level of mental contamination, there is no solution other than killing them. All right, then I'll ask your souls directly. Suho nodded and stopped the useless conversation. Crack! He crushed their heads without hesitation and immediately extracted their shadows as soldiers. Lead me to your base. The guys who became shadow soldiers obediently led Suho's party to their hideout. Kubera Guild? Ali Hassan, who was following behind Suho, recognized the place and widened his eyes. Do you know this place? I just know the name. It's a small guild with about 10 members. According to Hassan's explanation, there were a total of 17 guilds operating in Imphal, excluding the Imphal Guild, the only mid-sized one. All the rest were small, with only around 10 members. Of course, the strength of a guild could not be judged solely by the number of its members. Like the Wujin Guild led by Suho, where the guild leader possessed overwhelming power that no one could match. Or, there were many small elite guilds where each member was as strong as 100. But even considering all those possibilities, there was no chance that Suho's party would be outmatched. Bang! Without even bothering to open the door, they smashed through the wall and went inside. Who is it? While the variants inside were startled and took up a fighting stance, Suho's party's eyes were fixed on something else. Oh my God. Hassan's legs gave way, and he collapsed on the spot. A prison. No, a chicken coop. Cramped cages were crudely made with iron bars, and shabby beggars were huddled inside. And on their bodies were starpieces that seemed to have been forcibly implanted. The moment they witnessed the sight of those trapped in the lab, their skin mutating like reptiles. Snap! All emotion disappeared from within Suho. Harmakan. Yes, master. Kill them all. Whoosh! Harmakan activates Instance Dungeon. Harmakan immediately annihilated the hunters of the Kubera Guild, turning them into Suho's experience points. Then he checked the condition of the imprisoned people and reported. Fortunately, most of them haven't had the starpieces properly implanted yet. I think I can restore them back to normal. That's a relief. But Suho's hardened expression showed no signs of softening. Hassan said that the number of people trapped here was too small compared to the number of people who disappeared from the slums. It must be the same for other small guilds. Our Imphal Guild is a mid-sized guild, so we operate independently, but the rest of the small guilds have long been under Asura's control. There's no time. Liu Jigong's eyes were burning calmly as he silently watched the whole scene. The reason why the current situation was so disgusting was probably because the memories of his past life had resurfaced. At least back then, there was a minimal sense of camaraderie. The competition between guilds was fierce, but there was a premise that all of humanity would join forces to fight against the magical beasts. But now, how filthy. Humans experimenting on fellow humans, turning them into monsters. In our time, this was unimaginable. Liu Jigong drew his sword. Bang! Who is it? Liu Jigong? The hunters of the Rama Guild, another small guild in Imphal, were startled to see the face of the thug who suddenly barged into their office. I'll ask, are you from the Outer Gods cult? What's that? Your reply was too slow. Will you talk faster if one of your arms disappears? Xing, he really is Liu Jigong. As Liu Jigong drew his two longswords, the Rama Guild hunters involuntarily looked at each other, then, as if planned, began to scatter and flee in different directions. However, there were disgusting, lizard-like tails protruding from behind them. Seeing this, Liu Jigong nodded. Legs are better than arms. Flash! Kya! My leg! The legs of the fleeing hunters were cleanly cut off by the sword that was swung without hesitation. Blood spurted out. Blue blood. They were no longer human. Liu Jigong left those screaming and rolling on the floor behind and ran after the hunters who had fled in the opposite direction. Unlike Liu Jigong, whose methods were ruthless, Esil was relatively gentlemanly. Knock knock. Excuse me, is this the Chandra Guild? Demons were a race that could understand thoughts and communicate easily in any language. It was the same in India. Of course, simply speaking the language did not guarantee that a smooth conversation would take place. Soon, the door opened, and a hunter appeared, scanning Esil up and down with wary eyes. Yes, that's right. What brings you here? Did you kidnap any poor people here? Why are you suddenly speaking so informally? That necklace. Grrr. It was a well-known fact now that the main ingredient of Esfugeth Tardist was demon blood. Sensing the necklace hanging around the hunters' necks, the dignity of a demon noble emanated from Esil's entire body. Take off that necklace yourself. If you can't, I'll consider you a member of the Outer Gods cult. Outer Gods cult? Or would you prefer an Itarim's bitch? Smirk. The moment the words Outer Gods cult came out of Esil's mouth, the hunter's eyes were already dyed with a ferocious glint. Their pupils resembled those of reptiles. Who is this woman? Seeing the hunters suddenly revealing their bloodlust and charging at her, Esil nodded. I guess I can kill them. Stab, stab, stab. If Liu Jigang was a merciless swordsman, Essel was a demon, a true demon noble of pure bloodline. Kia! Save him. Chapter 211. Chapter 210. In Imphal. Turning away from the splendor of the city center and walking through the shady back alleys, there was an old, ramshackle slum that looked as if it could collapse at any moment. A few years ago, businessmen took an interest in this place, and a new sign was put up. Redevelopment Zone. This shabby back alley was now a golden land, destined to be completely transformed into the glamorous front street. However, if redevelopment proceeded, the poor people living here would inevitably lose their homes and end up on the streets. Naturally, those who lived there continued to protest, and the government and businessmen either coaxed and appeased them or even resorted to threats to drive them out. That was just 3 years ago. Now, all that was left was the redevelopment. But even the most brilliant businessmen could not have foreseen a global cataclysm that happened after the city of Imphal turned into a field-type dungeon overnight. The tedious and ambitious plans of the investors were indefinitely delayed. Of course, the businessmen had no intention of just sitting back and watching this situation unfold. A super-large field, the conquest of which would take a long time if they just waited. For the businessmen, time was money, and they couldn't just vaguely rely on the hunters of Imphal and wait for the takeover of this place. In the end, they unanimously decided to accept some losses. They decided that it would be cheaper to entrust the conquest to the Asura Guild, India's strongest force, and conquer the dungeon as soon as possible. And Siddharth Bachchan gladly accepted their invitation. On the surface, he claimed to have stepped up to save the poor citizens, but behind the scenes, the logic of capital was thoroughly applied, and the output was as satisfying as the large input. The moment Siddharth Bachchan joined the conquest, one of the many gates in the Loktak field was closed in an instant. It was good until then. Manu Kazal, the governor of Manipur, who had mediated the deal between the businessmen and Siddharth Bachchan, was now biting his lip with an anxious expression. Until now, touching the stardust necklace hanging around his neck had calmed his heart, but today felt different. How did it come to this? Siddharth Bachchan, after that initial conquest, was not conquering the remaining dungeons at all, and was just dragging his feet. Of course, he still went in and out of the gates with his guild members, but Manu Kizal already knew that the purpose was not conquest. What is the purpose of conducting such experiments? Manu Kazal didn't know the specific objective, but he was aware that Siddharth Bachchan was conducting some kind of biological experiment in Imphal. He also knew that the subjects of the biological experiment were the poor people of Imphal. As the governor, who had to continue redevelopment with businessmen, it was better to dispose of the poor people in advance, so Manu Kizal had been turning a blind eye to this fact. But that came back to bite him. He's been giving me orders since some time ago, as if he's the governor. The conquest was delayed, and complaints from businessmen were piling up, but he could somehow endure that. What he was more dissatisfied with was Siddharth Bachchan's behavior towards him. However, from the moment he turned a blind eye to Siddharth Bachchan's actions, he too was no different from an accomplice. Now he had no choice but to wait for him to get what he wanted and conquer the field-type dungeon as promised. Suddenly, a faint light emanated from the necklace he was fiddling with. Then, as if by magic, his discontent subsided a little. Well, in the end, the things Mr. Siddharth Bachchan is doing aren't exactly bad for me. Yes, everything is fine. As this thought naturally permeated his mind, he eventually nodded. Who knows, the reason he's secretly raising an army through biological experiments might be to separate Manipur from India, starting with the Loktak field. Imphal would become the capita of that independent nation. Then what would happen to me? It was obvious. King Manu Kizal's heart began to pound. Siddharth Bachchan possessed unmatched power, but he was by no means a politician. A politician was needed to run state affairs. In the end, I'll be in charge of politics, and he'll be in charge of national defense. In other words, if Siddharth Bachchan's goal succeeded, he would become the head of an independent nation, not just a governor. Even though the land he ruled would be the same, the meaning of a governor elected by votes and the king of a nation was completely different. Having finished this thought, the corners of Manu Kizal's lips curled up slightly, and as he confidently raised his head to look ahead again, blue malice flowed from his eyes. Therefore, far in his sight, there were foreign enemies who had suddenly invaded Imphal today and were hunting hunters. Invaders must be killed, for our grand goal. Smirk. A decision that could not be understood by common sense flowed from the lips of Manu Kizal, who was continuing his delusions as if he had lost his mind. Ha! China's Liu Jigang crossed the border and invaded Imphal? Do everything in your power to kill him and his subordinates. No matter how much of a 6-star hunter Liu Jigang was, he was still a human with blood flowing through him. If they kept pushing him until he was exhausted, he would eventually die. If the fact that we killed Liu Jigang with our own hands becomes known to the world, we will be recognized as an independent nation that no one can ignore from that moment on. Manu Kizal eventually declared an all-out war against Liu Jigang's party, who were stirring up the guilds of Imphal. The hunters they hunted were just incomplete experimental subjects anyway, half-baked variants who, fortunately, hadn't had their minds collapse, but they had only absorbed a few drops of dragon blood. Even the mighty Liu Jigang wouldn't be safe against a true army of dragonids. Kill them! Kill! Suho's party learned the whole story about what's happening in this city while treating the beggar boy that Beru had saved in the back alley. So you don't know where Siddharth Bachchan is? I was locked up in a cage the whole time, so I have no idea. All I know is that he's somewhere in the dungeons. The boy was experiencing the miracle of his wounds gradually healing due to the effect of the healing potion as he answered the questions. For him, born in the slums, it was truly an experience like God's grace. Master, I have removed the star fragment. Harmakan's treatment was also finished, and the boy was able to regain his appearance from before he was experimented on. However, Harmakan, who had personally treated him, found out why the hunters were chasing this little boy so desperately. This young human's constitution seems to be particularly well suited to dragon blood compared to the other test subjects we've rescued so far. You're saying he was a cherished test subject? Yes, if he had remained imprisoned like this, he would have successfully transformed into that form. At those words, Suho turned his gaze to the variants that were suddenly swarming towards them. Each and every one of them was emitting the energy equivalent to at least in C, or maybe B rank, perhaps even higher. There were hundreds of them, but considering that they were still pouring in endlessly even at this moment, it seemed like thousands would eventually gather. However, what was truly terrifying about them was not their numbers, but the fact that they were intelligent like the ice elves, unlike the magical beasts that only moved on instinct. This is enough force to overthrow a decent-sized country. Siddharth, what the hell is this guy doing? Liu Jigang clicked his tongue. This was like a large guild made up entirely of villains. The fact that these dragonids had lost their humanity made them an even more terrifying and destructive group. But to someone else, this situation was a delightful sight. He, king of dragons, the monarch of destruction, licks his lips. The king of dragons, the monarch of destruction, claims that Ragnar's magic power will increase if he absorbs the dragon blood from their bodies. And leveling up too. Suho nodded at Antares' words, his eyes gleaming. The job change quest to become the monarch of destruction. He might be able to achieve the first goal of reaching level 100 within today. Looking at the charging dragonids, Suho summoned all the soldiers who were scattered around searching for the void gate to him. Arise. At that command, the shadow soldiers rose from Suho's shadow. Swoosh! The momentum they unleashed in unison overwhelmed the battlefield. Liu Jigang, despite being on the same side, couldn't help but be astonished as he witnessed the tremendous sight. Oh my God! Were the summons I've seen so far, not all of them? Not to mention Greed, whom he had personally crossed swords with. The energy that the other soldiers were emitting was also extraordinary. Gulp. Liu Jigang's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. More than anything else, he already knew the true terror of Suho's summons. They were an immortal army that regenerated infinitely no matter how much damage they took. What a terrifying ability. Even though Liu Zhigang had met Sung Jinwoo in his previous life, he had never witnessed his true power. That's why he was now instinctively looking for Sung Jinwoo's image in Suho. But one thing was certain. He's still far behind him. Moreover, they were vastly outnumbered compared to the swarming enemies. Suho's current forces numbered only 50. It was the number of troops, including the stored soldiers and the temporary mercenaries he had recruited along the way. There were even ordinary shadow soldiers among them who had become soldiers themselves for revenge. On the other hand, the number of enemies was constantly increasing, with a numerical difference of 20 or even 30 times. Furthermore, it was impossible to easily estimate the odds of winning, considering how strong Siddharth Bachchan might have become through the power of the outer gods lurking behind this, at least from Liu Zhigang's point of view. However, smirk. We can just replenish the lacking forces. Number of extractable shadows, number of storable shadows. I've invested quite a bit in intelligence. And one more thing, he could just strengthen the weak soldiers. Harmakan, enhance the shadow soldiers. Yes, I will use the Death Knight's armor. The armor, which Harmakan had developed in the past to use on evil spirits, was summoned, and the shadow soldiers readily wore it. Kya! The vengeful spirits, reborn as Death Knights, were still shedding tears inside the armor, but all that resentment poured out towards the dragonids who had experimented on them. At that moment, Suho's shadow dyed the surroundings black. Using skill, Monarch's whoosh. Stats of shadow soldiers fighting on the caster's shadow are increased by 50%. All the soldiers on his shadow roared, surrendering their bodies to the boiling thrill. The full-scale battle had begun. Harmakan uses skill damage amplification. Increases damage taken by those cursed, causes fatal wounds even from normal attacks. Harmakan uses skill Thorn of Pain, shares all pain and damage taken by shadow soldiers with the attacker. The result was devastating. The King of Dragons, the Monarch of Destruction, bursts into laughter. The King of Dragons, the Monarch of Destruction, urges Ragnar on. Is this Sung Jinwoo's son? Liu Zhigang was speechless. Along with one more person. Governor Manu Kizal, who was watching this carnage from afar, atop a tall building, couldn't come to his senses either. What is that? What was happening? His city was being overrun by evil spirits. He turned around without hesitation and started running. Chapter 212, Chapter 211, Variant 26, Variant 31. The Asura Guild had conducted countless experiments. There were many failures, but there were also many successes. The result was those enhanced humans, the Dragonite army. Gasp! Even as he fled in a hurry, Manu Kizal couldn't hide his confusion. This is ridiculous. How could this happen? The Dragonite army that the Asura Guild had painstakingly developed was gradually crumbling. No, his side still had the upper hand in the war. But what was that? Why? Things were going terribly wrong. Ka! Is that all you've got? Why won't they die? What kind of monsters were those? Even if their limbs were torn off, even if half of their bodies were ripped off, even if their necks were completely crushed, those few dozen summons on the other side wouldn't die. This is ridiculous. An immortal army. Where the hell did those guys come from? Moreover, that wasn't the only problem. Arise. That damn necromancer. What kind of a cheat skill is that? He could have never imagined. At first, he thought Liu Zhigang was the problem, but it turned out that the young guy was the bigger issue. Arise. The sight of black smoke-like souls rising from the corpses of the dragonids at the necromancer's command was chilling. Wah! What the hell is that? If he was dreaming, this was the worst nightmare of his life. The other side was immortal, and if his side died, they immediately became part of the opposing forces. The enemies were multiplying. How could such an unfair and one-sided battle exist? This is bad. At this rate, it's a sure loss. In the end, there was only one way. Manu Kizal was originally a capable person, and he desperately tried to come up with a way to overcome this predicament. Overturn the game. The principle of unchanging magic power. There couldn't be a real immortal army in this world. If he annihilated them with an overwhelming force in one blow, leaving no room for resurrection, they surely wouldn't be able to revive anymore. This definitely requires Mr. Siddharth to step up in person. But that's surely what they want right now. Manukizal grasped their strategy at once with his sharp intelligence. That annoying necromancer is trying to confuse us about the situation and lure out Mr. Siddharth. So Liu Jigang is there as a countermeasure. That's right. Perhaps this incident was the beginning of a plan by China to invade India. China's Liu Jigang and India's Siddharth Bachchan. There has always been a debate about who is stronger between the two. Of course, in the hunter rankings created by the U.S. Hunter Bureau, Siddharth Bachchan was ranked lower than Liu Jigang. But Manu Kizal, who knew the hidden truth about the Indian hunter, knew how meaningless those rankings were. Ha! China's Liu Jigang? The world is completely fooled. Mr. Siddharth has already surpassed the wall that humans cannot reach. Manu Kijal, who was desperately running away while shaking his head, suddenly became completely filled with a blue aura. Whether it was because of the stardust necklace or some other influence, the wariness he had felt towards Siddharth Bachchan until recently had melted away like snow. Instead, a new emotion had taken its place, blind loyalty. Mr. Siddharth is an apostle of the great gods. Suddenly, Manu Kizal's steps stopped in front of an ominously flickering crack, and he shouted at the dragonids guarding it. "Quickly bring Mr. Siddharth here. China has invaded." "Master is busy. Didn't he tell you to handle trivial matters by yourself?" Manu Kizal faltered, overwhelmed by the sharp gazes of the dragonids. But he quickly remembered the seriousness of the situation and shouted again. "Hey, Liu Jigang has appeared. If Mr. Siddharth doesn't come out himself, we'll lose Imphal." Liu Jigang? The dragonids, who still had their human memories, stiffened at the name. "Then wait here. I'll report to Master and come back." "No, there's no time for that. Now, I'll meet him in person and explain." "Ha, you?" The dragonid smirked as he tried to force his way through the gate. "Forget it. If you go in there now, we won't even be able to collect your bones. Master is very hungry right now." Shiver. Realizing that the words weren't just a threat, Manu Kizal faltered. Hungry? What do you mean? There should be enough food." "Food, keke. Kihi. He means sacrifices." At the mocking laughter, Manu Kizal looked anxiously beyond the gate they were guarding. "What the hell are you doing in there?" Bang! Before he could finish his sentence, the huge sword the dragonid was holding plunged into the ground in front of his feet. "Refrain from blasphemous words. This is a sacred sanctuary." Hiccup. Anyway, wait patiently. My subordinate has already gone to wake up Master." Manu Kizal's legs gave way, and he collapsed in front of the cracked sky. At the same time, he couldn't help but feel uneasy as he ruminated on the words he had just heard. Wake up? Was it his imagination? For some reason, he suspected those words didn't simply mean waking up from sleep. Siddharth Bachchan opened his eyes. "Liu Jigang?" "That's what they say." Siddharth Bachchan's eyes narrowed as he smiled at the dragonid's report. Despite being told that humanity's greatest force had attacked with his men in tow, he didn't seem flustered or hurried at all. Rather, he looked indifferent. A nostalgic name. His pitch-black eyes sank faintly at the name Liu Jigang, which he hadn't heard in a long time. And he reminisced about that man, recalling memories of the past that was now lost. 7-star hunter Liu Jigang, a man who was once a comrade. Liu Jigang was truly a strong person. Without him, even I wouldn't have survived against the Kamish. But the current Liu Jigang is different from the person he was in the past. That's right, the current Siddharth Bachchan had regained all the knowledge of his past life, the moment he accepted the power of the outer gods. And the shock of the day when those two sets of memories collided in his mind still lingered. The truly horrific battle with Kamish. The great title of national-level hunter he gained afterward. However, the overwhelming apocalypse that struck Earth again 10 years later brought him despair in the true sense of the word, on a completely different level from the Kamish incident. What happened back then? Did the world end? He didn't remember the final moments exactly. Because the communication equipment broke down, news from all over the globe didn't reach them anymore. He had heard that a hunter named Sung Jinwoo from Korea had put up quite a fight, but he was also just a human, so he must have died in the end. Still, if he had to recall the last moment, Siddharth Bachchan was in the middle of a fierce battle with the dragons that had suddenly appeared. At some point, he lost consciousness, and when he came to, The whole world was at peace. The moment he recalled the shocking memories of his past life, he was dumbfounded, facing the monumental truth that the horrific history had all been undone. That time had turned back. And decades later, the fact that gates opened on Earth again, similar to that time, and that they were invaded by magical beasts again, sent chills down his spine. At that moment, he realized, is that so? Amidst this repetition of chaotic history, Siddharth Bachchan, who had once again awakened as an S-rank hunter, was convinced of the fate given to him. Himself, the only hunter who lived with all the memories of his past life. Only I can save this Earth. He was chosen as the savior of this world. Whoosh! He grasped the power of the outer gods that had come into his hands and smiled crookedly. If one were to compare, there wasn't much difference between himself in his past life and this life. Back then, he received power from the apostles of the gods called rulers and waged war against the monarchs. In this life, he received power from an apostle who served the outer gods. Although the source of the power was slightly different, he once again gained the strength of a national-level hunter. This was fate. No, it was the destiny given to him. Nothing has changed. I just fight. Then who was this fight for? Naturally, it was a fight to protect the weak humans living in this world. Siddharth Bachchan could vouch for how much he had strived to protect them in his past life. But in the end, I failed back then. Many people died despite my efforts. He blamed himself for the past with a bitter expression. But ironically, his eyes were filled with blue madness. So I can't fail this time. That must be why I was given a second chance. That's why Siddharth Bachchan had made his choice, to avoid repeating his mistakes, to plan for a better future. Strengthen humanity. Thus began the project to strengthen all of humanity. No matter how hard I try to protect them, the weak will eventually die in vain. To save the pitiful humans who haven't awakened even a shred of magic power, they must become stronger themselves. And coincidentally, Siddharth Bachchan already knew what that method was. Just as the ruler's power was forcibly injected into his body once, I just need to forcibly inject power into humans' bodies. Of course, there would be some overload. Their bodies might not be able to withstand it and collapse. Even he, the mighty one, suffered from the after effects of adapting to the ruler's power for a while after receiving it for the first time. But humans were, after all, creatures of adaptation. If he got them used to it little by little, they would surely succeed someday. There might be minor sacrifices in the course of the research, but historically, sacrificing the few for the many was inevitable. And so countless experiments were conducted under his thorough plan. And unexpected luck was with him. No, in retrospect, it wasn't luck, but the teachings of the great gods, the Itarim. To think there was a path to the grave of berserk dragons in a place like this. Following the guidance of Itarim, a new world appeared before him one day as he wandered through the dimensional gap. And the moment he discovered the dragon eggs left unattended there, Siddharth Bachchan offered a heartfelt prayer to the great Itarim. And he gladly injected the dragon blood extracted from those eggs into his body first, as much as it could withstand. No, even more than that. To save this world, I need to become much stronger than my past self. Just like that, Siddharth Bachchan willingly gave up being human. Whoosh! A pair of blue dragon-like wings spread out from behind Siddharth Bachchan as he stepped out of the gate. Then, countless dragonids in front of him assumed a submissive posture. Siddharth's lips stretched wide at the satisfying sight. Deploy. Whoosh! His past life that ended in failure. The most terrifying beings he had faced in those painful memories. Siddharth Bachchan's Dragonid army, modeled after the Dragon Emperor Antares' legions of destruction, took flight in unison. Chapter 213, Chapter 212 Rumble. The ground shook as if there was an earthquake. The ominous magical energy filling the city stinged the skin. The roars of beasts echoed throughout the city. An overwhelming monster wave, like a dungeon break, engulfing it. Slash! Slash! In the midst of it all, Ryo Singh, wielding his twin swords and running precariously, managed to cut down the neck of another dragonid. Thud! Blue blood gushed out like a fountain, and the beast collapsed with a groan. Ryo Singh wiped the blood splattered on his face with the back of his hand, mixing it with the cold sweat. He was still trying to catch his breath. How many are left? The accumulated fatigue made the sky look yellow. Ryo Singh habitually tried to estimate the number of enemies, but soon gave up. The path he had passed was littered with the corpses of countless dragonids he had killed so far. However, an army tens, no hundreds of times larger, still filled his vision, endlessly swarming in. Even for a high-ranking hunter who could overwhelm a horde of magical beasts alone, the dragonids here were not ordinary magical beasts. They were all enhanced humans, once normal people, mutated by dragon blood. Each one possessed strength comparable to a B-rank magical beast, and with their remaining intelligence, they were capable of strategic combat. In other words, they were a legion capable of coordinated attacks with a proper mix of tanks and damage dealers, offense and defense. It was fortunate that they didn't have healers, but with this much quantity, the presence or absence of healers didn't matter. Guildmaster, what the hell are you doing here? Ryo Singh closed his eyes tightly, recalling Guildmaster Siddharth Bachchan, whom he has always respected. Who could have imagined that India's hero was secretly doing such terrible things, modifying fellow humans into magical beasts? It was an unforgivable act, no matter the justifications. Slash, slash. Ryo Singh's sword cut down another one, and he narrowly dodged the attacks of 3 dragonids who were hiding right behind it, waiting to pounce on him. Counterattack, dodge, counterattack, dodge, attack, and attack again. Will I survive? He was out of breath. He suddenly felt fear. Hunters were also human, after all. It was natural for them to bleed when injured and slow down when tired. As an A-rank hunter, he could hold out a little longer than others, but even he would eventually reach his limit, and that would be the same for even the great 6-star hunter of China, Liu Zhigang, or Suho. Or not? Ryo Singh's eyes widened as he glanced at his other comrades. Surprisingly, they didn't look tired at all. Ha! I felt so light after escaping from my inner demons. Flash! In an instant, Liu Zhigang's sword split a group of dragonids in half all at once. At the same time, a fountain of blue blood erupted like fireworks. Underneath it, a smile appeared on the lips of the white-haired veteran as he performed a splendid yet controlled sword dance. Good, very good. Today, he engaged in battle with an extremely refreshed mind. Exhaustion? This was his daily life. The days he spent constantly expelling that foreign energy from his body to avoid being consumed by Itarim's divinity. He had always walked the path of martial arts with his stamina at rock bottom. But what about that guy? On the other hand, in Liu Zhigang's opinion, Suho was the one who seemed unnatural. Unlike himself, whose breathing started to become ragged, Suho wasn't even shedding a drop of sweat. Truly amazing. Good stamina can't be the only explanation. Liu Zhigang's sharp eyes accurately saw through Suho's condition. He is moving even faster than before, as if he's getting stronger the more he fights. It wasn't just his imagination. The path Liu Zhigang had walked wasn't so shallow as to misjudge an opponent's skill. He became convinced that Suho was getting stronger. Is he constantly gaining more and more power, even while fighting? Is that even possible? Liu Zhigang was now superimposing the image of a man he saw a long time ago onto Suho. Sung Jinwoo, as expected of his son. In a time now forgotten and gone. In the erased past, Liu Zhigang had met Suho's father, Sung Jinwoo. They even sparred and tested their strength for a brief moment. But that was all. Liu Zhigang had never seen Sung Jinwoo fight with all his might. And even if he had, would he be able to grasp his true power at his meager level? The scene he witnessed when he went to support the defense against the supermassive gate that appeared over Seoul was still vivid in his mind. The marvelous sight of hundreds of thousands of magical beasts kneeling before Sung Jinwoo. He was not a being anybody could dare to evaluate, but now he could glimpse a bit of his potential through his son. Ding! Loosh! Swoosh! Level up notifications appeared again and again, and status recovery occurred every time his level increased. Kuow! Enemies caught in Suho's blade's storm were mercilessly cut down. That's right. For him, the more foes there were, the more experience points he could gain, and the easier it became to fight endlessly. To Ryo Singh and Liu Zhigang, who didn't know about the system, the sight was simply marvelous. Oh my god, is Suho's stamina infinite? He doesn't get tired even from a battle of this level? How could Korea give such an absurdly strong person a mere C rank? And, arise, shadow extraction successful. Kwah! As Suho's level increased, so did his intelligence stat and the number of shadow soldiers. Of course, it was still only 120, but this figure was increasing in real time. Of course, compared to the number of enemies, the power difference was ridiculous. However, this side was an immortal army that would never fall as long as he kept drinking mana potions. So as long as he didn't get scared and back down, they could continue this absurd battle. My liege, don't let your guard down. A disturbing presence is approaching from afar. Even in this situation, Beru was the only one worried about Suho. Your growth is important, but more than anything else, your safety is paramount. If you feel even the slightest bit of danger, you must return to Korea immediately. Although this large-scale battle had somehow broken out, Suho hadn't recklessly escalated things. The cooldown for the Shadow Exchange skill had long since reset. If necessary, he could switch positions with the Shadow Assassin, Kira, and move to Korea, just like when he came here. Since he was prepared to flee if necessary, he could focus on leveling up with peace of mind. Besides, he didn't intend to keep fighting these small fries forever. It's even better if the boss monster comes to me on his own. Suho's sense stat had also been warning him for a while now. The enormous presence that was surely Siddharth Bachchan was getting closer. Any minute now. That was when it happened. A huge shadow covered the sky. There! Easel pulled out the spear that had been thrust into the dragonid's heart, looked up and glared at the sky. Ryo Singh's face turned pale as he saw the same thing and screamed, "Oh my god, what the hell is that?" There, huge dragonids, mutated into hideous forms, were covering the entire sky with their wings spread wide. The Dragon King Antares, who was beside Suho, frowned at the sight. "Insolent, how dare you try to imitate the form of dragons with mere humans using dragon blood? What kind of experiments had they been conducting?" The appearance of the giant dragonids was hideous and crude, like a patchwork of rags. However, only the great king of dragons, the monarch of destruction, was dissatisfied. The power of those chimeras, a combination of human life force, the unbalanced magic power of the outer gods, and the strength of dragons, was by no means something to be ignored. Shiver! Liu Jigong felt a bad premonition and shouted to everyone, "Something's coming! Spread your magic power, Thu! Rough out your body and be prepared." Immediately after, the mouths of the creatures in the sky opened wide, roaring towards Suho's group. A terrible bloodlust descended upon this land. Dragon activated! Dragon fear! The worst skill of the dragons that didn't discriminate between friend and foe. The movements of those on the ground stiffened at the soul-stirring cry that plunged all those weaker than themselves into despair. He was ecstatic. Siddharth Bachchan felt rewarded, as if he had lived until this day solely to see this sight. The countless efforts he had made to recreate the terror of the dragons in his memories, repeating countless failures and successes. The result of accumulating their noble sacrifices was the miracle of this moment. Gah! Dragon fear. The powerful roars of the Dragonite army combined into one, and a terror that no one in this world had ever experienced before, covered the ground like a powerful shockwave. The constant vibrations shook the atmosphere. The earthquake of magical power, like a natural disaster, caused all weak creatures, no matter friend or foe, to feel extreme fear, pain, and confusion. As a result, tsk! Siddharth Bachchan's lips twitched, and he couldn't help but let out a laugh. Look at that sight! The sight of even the mighty six-star hunter of China, Liu Jigong, frozen stiff, overwhelmed by this power. The refreshing sight of the black summons that were making a ruckus in the city, crumbling in an instant before this great power. And the one reigning over this entire situation with absolute power and authority was him, Siddharth Bachchan. Keh! Kaha! Siddharth Bachchan spread his wings wide in the sky and burst into an extremely crazed laughter. How could he be so lucky? Liu Jigong. If he caught that immobilized Liu Jigong and transformed him into a dragonid, how powerful of a soldier could he create? His mouth was already watering. He pointed at Liu Jigong's party, who were overwhelmed by dragon fear, and ordered his soldiers. Capture them all. You can cut off their limbs as long as they survive. At his command, the Dragonid army roared and flapped their wings, and like falcons hunting a prey that was frozen in fear, they reached out their claws to snatch them. But then, this is quite something. There was a being completely unaffected by dragon fear, the Dragon King Antares. To think you would gather these mongrels and even imitate dragon fear. The Dragon King, possessing the body of the baby dragon Ragnar, was smiling. However, the emotion burning in his eyes as he glared at the sky was undisguised displeasure. He had realized who those ragged mongrels were imitating. You dare imitate me. Suho was at least the son of the Shadow Monarch. The title of Dragon King wasn't so insignificant that even such a lowly creature could try to take his place. Whoosh! In response to the Dragon King's anger, hot flames erupted from Ragnar's small body. The energy pierced through the silence that seemed to freeze even time and reached Siddharth Bachchan. Flinch! Siddharth Bachchan, feeling that something was wrong, sensed the presence of the small dot, Ragnar, and turned his head in that direction. His eyes couldn't help but widen. How? In the middle of the city, where everyone should have been frozen whether friend or foe due to dragon fear, there was a man still diligently moving in the midst of the battlefield. He was none other than Suho, who didn't miss the opportunity of everyone being frozen by the area of effect stun, and continued to eliminate the immobile enemies. Ding! Ding! Level up! Level up! As a result, and at that moment, the completion condition for Job Change Quest, Dragon King's Trial 1 has been met. The ground and the sky, Suho's and Siddharth Bachchan's eyes have met. Chapter 214, Chapter 213, India's Hero, Siddharth Bachchan. When he finally appeared, there was a brilliantly shining blue star in the center of his forehead. The man who was once a national-level hunter had become the high priest of the foreign religion. That wasn't all. Unlike Huang Dong-su, who was also a high priest, Siddharth Bachchan had become Variant 1, fully adapted to dragon blood. A pair of dragon-like wings spread from his back. Huge horns, like a crown, sprouted from his head, and scales covered his entire body like armor. He was truly a dragon-human hybrid. The perfect form, completely different from the other incomplete variants, was possible because the Apostle of Itarim residing in his body forcibly compressed all the imbalance and chaos into his body. Beru peeked out from Suho's shadow, recognized the divine power of the outer gods hidden within Siddharth Bachchan, and shouted, "My liege, it's an Apostle of Itarim." On the other hand, Siddharth Bachchan's eyes trembled with astonishment as he looked down at Suho from high above. He never imagined it, that there would be a human who could withstand the power of dragon fear. No way. There's a human stronger than Liu Jigang? And that was even in a situation where the mighty Liu Jigang was frozen in fear. But at that moment, the image of a man popped into Siddharth Bachchan's mind, the man who existed in the lost timeline that no one remembered anymore. Come to think of it, even in that era, there was a hunter as strong as Liu Jigang, no, even stronger. His eyes widened in astonishment as he remembered the man's name. Could it be Sung Jinwoo? No, that's impossible. Siddharth Bachchan strongly denied reality at the sudden thought. It had been decades. Even Sung Jinwoo, the strongest hunter on Earth, who was rumored to be far stronger than all the national-level hunters in the world at the time, was still human. He, too, should have aged like himself by now. But look at that young hunter. His appearance seemed to be of similar nationality to Sung Jinwoo, but anyone could see that he was only in his 20s. Moreover, the first thing Siddharth Bachchan did after regaining his old memories was to look for Sung Jinwoo, who would be living in Korea. The purpose, of course, was to persuade or kidnap him to be transformed into one of his Dragonid soldiers, but that plan was bound to fail, because he was nowhere to be found. Missing? Surprisingly, Sung Jinwoo had vanished from the world without a trace at the same time as the cataclysm. So it can't be Sung Jinwoo. No, even if it is Sung Jinwoo, so what? I must be much stronger now anyway. In this world where Sung Jinwoo had disappeared, only he could be the savior of humanity. I am the only savior chosen by the gods. Flash! Blue haze flared in Siddharth Bachchan's eyes. Even better. A test subject stronger than Liu Shigang is more than welcome, he shouted as he reached out his dragon scale-covered hand towards Suho. Capture that guy and bring him before me. My soldiers, my Dragonid army, deploy. Ka! At his command, the dragonids filling the sky roared and spread their wings. A fierce storm of murderous intent tore through the atmosphere, and countless attacks concentrated on Suho. Suho! Esiel's urgent cry was heard through the gusting wind. However, she was also trembling and unable to move due to dragon fear. All she could do was squeeze out her voice towards Suho with a worried expression. Ryo Sing and Liu Jigang felt the same. They didn't know how Suho could withstand this terrible bloodlust and move, but they all prayed with one heart that he would dodge those tremendous attacks. "I'll create an opening." Liu Jigang barely managed to squeeze out his voice and shout. He couldn't let such a promising young man lose his life so meaninglessly. If Suho was truly a growing hunter, he would become even stronger in the future, and someday he would grow into the one and only guardian who could protect the peace of humanity. Like Sung Jinwoo. Kya, so he had to save that guy no matter what. He was already old. The future of humanity had to blossom from the hands of young people with such potential. A determined light appeared in Liu Jigang's eyes. Cold sweat dripped down his entire body. Blood trickled from the corner of his clenched mouth. He barely endured the fear that weighed heavily on his entire brain and tightly gripped the hilt of his sword. "Sung Suho!" Liu Jigang gathered all his strength into one point. His forearm swelled up as if it were about to burst. "You at least escape from here." And he swung his sword towards Siddharth Bachchan high above. Flash! Liu Jigang's sword energy drew a semicircle, piercing through the stormy atmosphere and flying away. Kya! The wings of the dragonids rushing towards the ground were torn, and their bodies were split in half in front of his sword energy. Blue blood poured down from the sky like rain. However, Liu Jigang's attack, despite its tremendous power, ultimately failed to reach Siddharth Bachchan. Pathetic, Liu Jigang. Siddharth Bachchan flapped his wings lightly with an arrogant look. A wall of blue aura appeared, easily deflecting his weakened sword energy. "You dare to defy me with your old and worn-out body, when even with all your might it wouldn't be enough. Surrender to me, become my soldier." And flash. As he spoke, the star fragment on his forehead glowed, and his eyes were filled with madness. "I will grant you the glory of becoming an apostle of the great Itarim, just like me." Bang! Whoa! The blue energy exploded, and Liu Jigang's body was thrown back. At the same time, a dragonid that happened to be flying in the air mercilessly clawed at his body. Thud! Liu Jigang plummeted vertically to the ground, blood spurting from his mouth. But he wasn't just taking the hits passively. Kya! The dragonid that attacked him suddenly screamed and fell. Liu Jigang's sword was now embedded near its heart. Not bad, but that's all. Siddharth Bachchan had long since lost interest in Liu Jigang. His gaze had been fixed on someone else all along. Just then, the frenzied attacks of the dragonids poured down on Suho. But even in the face of that mighty terror, he didn't back down an inch and smiled. Now that he had reached level 99, the dragonids in front of him were no longer of interest to Suho. The Dragon King Antares had a dissatisfied expression, but he couldn't break his promise to Sung Jinwoo. "You finally earned the qualification. Ding! The job change quest completion reward has arrived. Would you like to check the reward?" Accept reward. The moment the system window appeared, Suho immediately accepted the reward handed over by Antares. Ding! Acquired the title candidate for the position of Dragon King. Whoosh! Suho's eyes widened. Suddenly a hot inferno erupted from deep within his chest. The tremendous energy swirled around his entire body like a snake, turning into a black-red flame and raging fiercely. Ugh! Beyond his vision, blurred with immense pain, Suho saw the Dragon King Antares, smiling. "Let's see how you endure this. My trial is just beginning." Title: Candidate for the position of Dragon King. The minimum qualifications to undergo the Dragon King's trial have been met. The King of Dragons, the Monarch of Destruction Antares, has acknowledged the player's qualifications. Effect: Heart of the Dragon King. Mana plus 100 thump. The Heart of the Dragon Emperor. At that moment, an enormous concentration of magical power appeared inside the right half of Suho's chest. Thump, thump. Ugh! The fierce flow of mana emanating from the heart of the Dragon King rampaged through Suho's entire body, relentlessly pounding his insides. As a result, his HP, which had been restored by the recent level up, began to plummet in real time. But even in that tremendous pain, he gritted his teeth and endured, screams escaping from his lips. This was a kind of pride contest. Having declared that he would inherit the power of the monarch, who was already defeated and killed by his father, he couldn't bear to show weakness in front of him. But the more he endured, the more intense the pain became. But as Suho staggered, unable to focus, Kya! A dragonid, dodging Liu Jigong's sword energy and reaching Suho, opened its massive jaws wide to bite him. Vicious fangs were visible within. "Nu! Watch out, above!" Urgent screams erupted from everyone who witnessed the desperate situation. But that was when it happened. Stop! Suho, struggling in the hot flames, suddenly reached out his hand towards the dragonid that was right in front of him. Then, surprisingly, the creature that was about to bite him stopped right in its tracks. Huh? Liu Jigong's and Suho's other comrades' eyes widened at the strange sight. Why? Suddenly, the wind stopped, and so did the dragonids that were about to attack Suho. The mutants themselves had a look of incomprehension in their eyes. What is this? Siddharth Bachchan, who was commanding the army from high above, also couldn't hide his confusion. What the hell are you doing? His empty shout echoed through the heavy silence that appeared in the absence of wind. Suho was still engulfed in flames, and the pain was still there. It was a terrible heat that made him feel like his whole body would melt away at any moment. But despite that, he realized something. Heart of the Dragon King. The terrific ability that increased his mana by a whopping 100,000. With this enormous magic power, he would be able to summon shadow soldiers to his heart's content from now on. But that wasn't what was important right now. More significant was the fact that the Dragon King had acknowledged him. Suho had proven himself worthy of inheriting his power. Therefore, Suho realized, stop. Even in this terrible pain, he instinctively gave the order to all the dragons in front of him. Dragons, bow before me. That one sentence was enough. At that moment, the dragon blood flowing through all the dragonids reacted to Suho's voice. Kya! Against their will, they stopped flapping their wings and began to fall from the sky. That's it. Antares' lips curled up in satisfaction. The real Dragon King's trial hadn't even begun yet. Suho had just reached the starting line. But this was enough against these crude creatures born from a few drops of dragon blood. King of all dragons. That is the authority of the Dragon King. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The ground shook as if there was an earthquake. However, the true cause of the tremors were the dragonids falling like a meteor shower. What the hell? What's going on? Siddharth Bachchan screamed from the sky in a frenzy at the shocking sight. It was ominous, extremely ominous, even more so because the most dragon blood flowed through his body. But he endured thanks to the power of Itarim residing within him, engulfed in black and red flames. Suho raised his head again, looked at Siddharth Bachchan, and said, Now, only you are left. Name Sung Suho, level 99, class none, title candidate for the position of Dragon King, Wolf Slayer, natural enemy of insects, Demon Slayer HP 52,641, 96,140, MP 113,699, 113,699, Strength 204, Stamina 108, Intelligence 117, Sense 108 plus 5, available stat points to distribute, Skills. Passive skills, Tenacity, Dual Swordsmanship level 3, Martial Arts level 1, Unknown, Max active skills, Ruler's Authority level 1, Shadow Extraction level 2, Shadow Storage level 1, Monarch's Domain level 1, Storm Slash level 3, Giant's Armor level 1, Iron Body Technique level 4, Bloodlust level 1, Grasslands Wind Possession Only, Elfin Step level 1. Chapter 215, Chapter 214. High in the sky, Siddharth Bachchan couldn't hide his bewilderment. This can't be. This is ridiculous. Has he ever been this bewildered in his life? The Dragonid army he had painstakingly created, all those soldiers, had folded their wings and were bowing their heads before that young hunter. The great warriors who had far surpassed the limitations of their species were trembling like frightened mice in front of a mere human. Krr, krr. Judging from the humiliated expressions on their faces, their minds hadn't completely submitted. Their intellect still wanted to tear Suho's body to shreds and kill him, as Siddharth Bachchan had ordered. It wasn't even difficult. Their prey was standing within reach, but their instincts... The dragon blood settled in their hearts. It was forcibly suppressing their will. Submit to the authority of the Dragon King, but things weren't good for Suho either. The terrible pain, as if his soul was melting, pierced through his entire body, making him feel like he would lose consciousness at any moment. Looking at his HP, which was steadily decreasing in real time, he finally realized, I see why it had to be level 99. Why the minimum qualification set by the Dragon King had to be level 99. If my total HP had been lower, I would have burned to death in an instant before I could even properly use this power. The black flames originating from the heart of the Dragon King were trying to engulf Suho's body with the momentum to burn and destroy everything in the world. Gulp. Suho took out a healing potion and drank it, but it only slightly slowed down the rate at which his health was dropping. As long as he couldn't suppress the blazing black flames, being consumed by them was only a matter of time. Do you understand now? The Dragon King Antares was smiling meaningfully as he watched Suho. I clearly warned you how foolish and reckless it is for a mere human, who is not even a dragon, to try to become the Dragon King. But Suho had wanted it, and he willingly risked his life to accept the trial. Job changed. Dragon King's trial 2. The powerful flames emanating from the heart of the Dragon King are burning your weak body. If you fail to level up before your HP reaches 0, you will eventually turn to ashes and disappear. Remaining HP, 49,890 to 140. As a reward for taking on the trial, he gained several times the amount of mana he had before, but the accompanying risk was fatal. However, Suho felt as if his mind was clearing up. Potions could only buy him time, but leveling up would cure all status effects at once. He liked the simple solution and the clarity of what he had to do. You're saying I have to level up if I want to live. Just like always. Suho's eyes flashed in the flames. As the level rises, the amount of experience required to level up increases exponentially. That meant he had to hunt stronger opponents. For example, someone like Siddharth Bachchan. Alright, I'll gladly prove I am worthy. Suho forced the corners of his lips upward, gritting his teeth despite the pain. He threw away the empty potion bottle and tightly gripped Vulcan's horns in both hands. Engulfed in black flames, he kicked off the ground strongly. Towards Siddharth Bachchan. I'm worthy of having the heart of the Dragon King. Kaboom! The ground he was standing on caved in and shattered from the recoil. The hellfire following him surged like the tail of an ascending dragon. On the other side, Siddharth Bachchan bared his fangs with an even more ferocious expression. Cack! His dragon scale-clad arms swung like a claw, and following it, bluish-white aura streaked through the air, clawing at Suho. Boom! The sky split in two. One who had sold his soul to the outer gods to become a dragon himself, and one who had risked his life to accept the Dragon King's trial. The clash of the two forces, seemingly similar yet completely opposite, sent a tremendous shockwave sweeping across the sky and the earth, spreading in all directions. Ah! He help! Suho's comrades, caught in the blast, screamed and were tossed about by the wind. Even the dragonids who were forced to lie on the ground were flung in all directions, unable to withstand the aftermath. The effect of dragon fear had long since disappeared, but the situation had become even more chaotic. Boom, boom, boom! The sky was torn to shreds as Suho and Siddharth Bachchan clashed relentlessly. Suho used the skill Ruler's Authority to tread on the air, slashing at Siddharth Bachchan with countless attacks like thunder and lightning. Siddharth Bachchan, with his wings, drew countless curves, clawing and crushing Suho's body. Coincidentally, neither of them had the slightest intention of defending against each other's blows. Confident in their own sturdy defenses, they only attacked and attacked again. If they dodged, it was only for one purpose: to exploit the opponent's opening and inflict a critical hit. Oh my god, Suho had become stronger. Ryo Singh, caught in the vortex of the storm, couldn't help but admire the absurd sight. He knew that Suho was a growing hunter, but now he had far surpassed even the realm of incomprehensibility. For proof, one needed only to look at Liu Jigang. Even he was bewildered by Suho. As expected, Suho is amazing. Fool, it's not that simple. Liu Jigang rebuked Ryo Singh for his fuss. You could only notice as much as you knew. Liu Jigang, who had walked the path of a martial artist for many years before awakening as a hunter, could see exactly what state Suho was in as he unleashed that tremendous power. That's Sung Suho. He is using up his own life force. What? Li life? Liu Jigang gnashed his teeth with a deeply frustrated expression. Yes, he is burning his own life force to draw out power, to protect us. Ryo Singh's eyes widened in shock at those words. Although there was a slight misunderstanding in Liu Jigang's thinking, it wasn't entirely wrong, and Siddharth Bachchan also noticed this fact. Ha-ha! Ephemeral creature, you're gnawing away at your own lifespan to fight. Siddharth Bachchan mocked Suho, who was confronting him while engulfed in black flames. He was bewildered by the sudden appearance of someone stronger than he had imagined, but to find out that he was a berserker who was consuming his own life force to fight, he was someone who would self-destruct with time. You've coveted power too great for you. Siddharth Bachchan instinctively sensed that the power emanating from Suho was the Dragon King's energy, but his reaction was completely different from the other Dragonid soldiers who submitted. An obsessive and persistent greed emanated from him. That power is too much for you. I will kill you and take it. He was confident. There were still many of his Dragonid army alive in this area. Although they were temporarily in chaos due to the Dragon King's authority, the power implanted in their bodies wasn't just dragon blood. The source of strength that accounted for a greater proportion than just a few drops of dragon blood. It was the star pieces, the power of the outer gods. Oh gods, answer my prayer! He shouted towards the sky as he countered Suho's attack. At that moment, the star fragment embedded in his forehead emitted a blue light. Your faithful priest desires your noble and beautiful power. In response to his fervent prayer, the numerous star pieces embedded throughout his body flashed, emitting blue energy. The countless rays of light stretched out in all directions like fireworks. The rays of light forcibly raised the Dragonid soldiers who were trembling under the Dragon King's authority, like puppets hanging on strings. Then, they too began to emit light from the star pieces in their bodies, spreading their wings wide and soaring into the sky. My liege, be careful. A large army is approaching. Beru suddenly sensed the change and peeked out from Suho's shadow. But he wasn't just warning about the danger of the enormous Dragonid army. Beru's narrowed eyes turned towards Siddharth Bachchan. The apostle of the outer gods has revealed himself. Flash! At the same time as he spoke, they saw all the blue rays of light in the surroundings gathering into one in Siddharth Bachchan's hand. O gods, give me strength, more! With his continued fervent prayer, the power was compressed and compressed again, and finally, he tightly grasped this powerful weapon given by the great gods who existed beyond the distant outer space. Astra. The name immediately materialized into an axe in his hand. My liege, be careful. That's real, the power of outer gods. Beru peeked out from Suho's shadow, recognizing the familiar energy. It seems this apostle has made more preparations than the ones we've met so far. Before Beru could finish speaking, the giant outer god's axe, Astra, drew a huge semicircle and plunged towards the top of Suho's head. Kuwang. The sky was torn vertically. The power split even the ground beneath it in half. A true natural disaster. The roads and buildings caught in the attack crumbled. It was a strike of such tremendous power that even the bodies of the nearby Dragonid soldiers were torn to pieces. Oh my god. Fortunately, Ryo Singh was far away. He was so surprised by the power that far surpassed common sense that he muttered with a vacant expression, Astra. The legendary weapon summoned by borrowing the power of the gods. Astra. In ancient Sanskrit, it meant weapon. In Indian mythology, weapons or magic that summoned the power of the gods were called Astra. And now, the power displayed by Siddharth Bachchan was truly worthy of being called the power of a god. Heh, you managed to avoid it. Siddharth Bachchan found Suho standing in front of him unscathed and gave a crooked smile. It didn't matter that he was fine. Rather, it was even more exhilarating that the guy who had been arrogantly taking all his attacks head-on was finally scared and dodged. He raised Astra, which gods had placed in his hand, once again and bared his fangs. Let's see you try to dodge this. Like a scared rat. The sight of the numerous Dragonid soldiers rising behind him at that moment was a terrifying scene. However, Siddharth Bashchan could never have imagined how grave a mistake he had made with that attack just now. Gray, growl. The shadow wolf, Gray, who had approached at his call, let out a howl. Suho's lips curled up. Come in. The spirit of Pet, Gray possesses the priest's body. Whoosh! In an instant, Suho's hair turned white, the color mixing with the Dragon King's flames. The king of beasts, the Fang Monarch, bares his fangs with a ferocious expression. We have a lot of mana, so let's go all out from now on. Suho's gaze briefly turned towards the ground. To be exact, towards the corpses of the dragonids who had been torn to shreds by Astra. Arise, all of you. Kah! An army against an army. The roar of the countless shadows, whose bodies were modified and souls mocked by the power of the outer gods, shook the heavens and earth. Chapter 216, Chapter 215, Shadow Extraction, Successful.
Shadow extraction successful.
From the remains of the dragonid soldiers swept away by the power of the outer god's axe, Astra. Pitch-black shadows reach out towards the sky, screaming in agony. Those hands gripped the ground and began to pull their souls out from the sea of the afterlife. There were so many of them that, from a distance, it was an eerie sight, like watching a centipede with countless legs crawling up from hell. Huh? Ryo Singh's face turned deathly pale at the sight of the hellish scene, but Liu Zhang's eyes gleamed instead. The scene reminded him of that day long ago, the sight of Sung Jinwoo leading an army of thousands. Don't be afraid, they're on our side. The black shadows, exuding a jet-black aura of death, made anyone who saw them feel fear. But surprisingly, each of those black figures had tears flowing from their eyes. Pitiful souls who had been forcibly dragged away, unable to even face death as humans after the endless pain of repeated experiments. No one could fathom their despair and misery. Therefore, I'll give you a chance. A chance to take revenge on Siddharth Bachchan with your own power. All forces. Clank, 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 clank. At Suho's command, they all lifted their heads and spread their wings, and they glared at Siddharth Bachchan with eyes burning with rage. Deploy. At Suho's order, the shadow soldiers who have returned from death spread their wings. On the other side, the Dragonid army, who were their comrades until just now and still follow Siddharth Bachchan's orders, flew in and began an all-out war with Suho's army. Boom, 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 from bottom to top, from top to bottom. At the forefront of that fierce battle, Suho and Siddharth Bachchan clash once again. I don't need those small fries anymore. I've already completed Astra. Siddharth Bachchan swung the outer god's axe, once again. Kuwang. This time, it wasn't the ground that was cut, but the air, and a dimensional rift opened in the weapon's path. The blue mist flowing through the momentary crack in the sky settled on the axe, Astra that Siddharth Bachchan held. Beru's eyes widened as he witnessed the phenomenon. Now he saw that Siddharth Bachchan's plan had a far greater purpose than just imitating the Dragon King's army. It was the superposition of rifts. Just as a void gate opens when three ordinary gates overlap, the soldiers who successfully implanted star pisces each opened countless tiny holes here. The energy of the outer gods flowed in through the gaps made by those numerous rifts, and the result of that power gathering into one was that axe. My liege, if we leave that axe alone, this entire area will turn into a world like that of the Ice Elves. Beru shouted, pointing at Astra. He meant that the dimension would be torn to shreds, just like the icy land where Cha-Hain and the Ice Elves lived. Then we need to stop it, not avoid it. Suho's eyes flashed as he gathered his strength. Using skilled giant's armor. Swoosh! When Suho used giant's armor, a different phenomenon occurred than usual. The black flames blazing to engulf Suho begin to mix with the shadow's energy and influence his skill. As a result, ding! Skilled giant's armor has leveled up. Swoosh! The armor wrapped around Suho's entire body became even more solid. He glanced down at the black flame-covered full-body armor and then rushed towards Siddharth Bachchan at tremendous speed, and he swung Vulcan's horns, which he now held in his hands. Using skill Storm Slash. This time was the same. The Dragon King's flames clung to the fierce wind that raged from Suho's swords. A storm of black flames raged. At that moment, he felt the pain of the inferno that was tormenting him disappear for a moment. The Dragon King's flames that were burning him stretched towards Siddharth Bachchan. Yes, that's it! Suho smiled faintly and nodded at Liu Jigong's shout from afar. So that's what it was. The way Liu Jigang had been expelling all his power from his body to avoid being mentally consumed by Itarim all these years. He had tried to imitate that method while using his skills, and it was effective. That realization immediately led to skill evolution. Skill Storm/Lul4 evolves into skill Storm of Black Flames 1. Kuwang. Siddharth Bhat swung Astra and tore apart the Storm of Black Flames. Surprisingly, the inferno was cut as the air was split in half. But it wasn't completely blocked. The Dragon King's flames persistently clung to the blade of Astra and then transferred to Siddharth Bachchan's body, inflicting serious burns. You're being dramatic. It's just a little taste. Suho chuckled at how satisfying his scream was. The brief respite was sweet, but Suho was once again engulfed in the flames erupting from the heart of the Dragon King. But he knew the trick now. Quay! Suho immediately used ruler's authority to step on the air and jumped higher than Siddharth Bachchan. Then, the Shadow Lancer Quay, who had flown in at the right time, appeared behind Suho, grabbed his body, and spread his wings. Weak! Quay changed direction and accelerated Suho's attack as he fell vertically. Ah! Suho's flames also clung to Quay, beginning to melt his shadow body. However, he only gritted his teeth at the Dragon King, more concerned about the fact that Suho had been enduring this level of pain alone than his own suffering. But Suho, as if he couldn't feel the pain, concentrated all the flames on one point instead, by using ruler's authority. Gather! Whoosh! The black flames burning him began to concentrate on his right arm, thanks to ruler's authority. More! How dare you imitate me? Siddharth Bachchan gnashed his teeth and swung Astra at Suho, who was plummeting vertically from the sky. Meanwhile, all the black flames in Suho's body gathered, burning his right arm black. Gritting his teeth, he gathered his consciousness that felt like it was about to fade from the terrible pain. He swung his sword with his body so hot that even his sweat evaporated. Take this, he said, twisting the corners of his lips upward. Using skill Storm of Black Flames. The highly compressed black flames mixed with the power of the skill. The moment his sword clashed with the outer god's giant axe, Astra, Kwang. For a moment, Siddharth Bachchan doubted his own eyes. Astra! The blade of Astra, bestowed to him by the great gods. The moment it touched Suho's black flames, it started to boil and melt. This! Siddharth Bachchan hurriedly pulled Astra back. Then, as if it had never melted, the blade began to restore itself, the blue energy gathering together. The material was, of course, the mana of the outer universe, the blue mist, flowing from the dimensional rift. But this was not a moment to be relieved. Suho, breaking through the raging storm of black flames in that split second, had already arrived right in front of Siddharth Bachchan. Grab. Gotcha! His strong grip tightly grasped Siddharth Bachchan's horns. Then, the Dragon King's flames transferred completely to Siddharth Bachchan's entire body through him. Whoosh! Kyak! Endure it. This is the Dragon King's power you wanted. Suho smirked at him as he writhed in pain, clenched his fist, and struck vertically downward. Every time he struck Siddharth Bachchan's head with his fist, a tremendous roar erupted as if a gas station was exploding. And finally, the two fighting in the sky plummeted to the ground. Kyuk! Siddharth Bachchan's eyes widened as if they were about to pop out, and he vomited blood from the impact he felt on his back. But even at that moment, he had no intention of admitting defeat. Even in this dizzying moment, he looked up at Astra, which had fallen from his hand and was floating in the sky with wide eyes. Astra! Kill this guy! Wick! Astra gladly responded to his command. The giant axe blade fell vertically, aiming for Suho's back. Protect the master! Countless shadow dragonids resolutely flew in between to protect Suho. Greed and Iron stood at the forefront, holding up a giant shield. Crackle! Astra descended, tearing through the air like an unavoidable judge of death. But even as they were torn apart by the giant axe blade, the shadow soldiers didn't back down. Greed and Iron, whose bodies were shattered first, were quickly restored by the vast magical power flowing from Suho like a tidal wave. They rose again to protect their master. But then something amazing happened. Flare, hot flames like a mirage, clung to the black bodies of the shadow soldiers regenerated by the magic power originating from the heart of the Dragon King. The Dragon King's magic power surging from their bodies was a double-edged sword that even Suho couldn't control. The mana emanating from the heart of the Dragon King was regenerating the shadow soldiers while simultaneously melting and destroying their bodies. It was as if the Shadow Monarch's power and the Monarch of Destruction's power were playing tug-of-war. At that moment, Greed and Iron exchanged glances as if they had agreed on something, their eyes shining. They instinctively realized what they had to do. "Everyone, listen! All forces, charge!" They threw away their shields and, along with the shadow soldiers burning with the Dragon King's flames, launched a physical assault towards Astra. Flare! Kaboom! The blade of Astra, touching the hot flames, started to boil. Large and small holes began to appear. The axe, which was plunging down with the force of divine punishment, lost its momentum in the air and began to disperse. Kyak! Seeing the unbelievable sight, Siddharth Bachchan, as if in a frenzy, plunged his claw-like mutated fingernails into Suho's side. Rip! Suho's defense was finally pierced, and blood splattered. But this level of pain meant nothing to him now. The blood spurting from his side instantly evaporated due to the Dragon King's flames that still burned his body, and as if he didn't care about the pain, Suho's hand still tightly grasped Siddharth Bachchan's horns, refusing to let go. Kia! Let go! Let go of me! Siddharth Bachchan desperately struggled in the Dragon King's flames, ruthlessly attacking Suho's body with both hands. But rather than countering, Suho just silently held on to him. That alone was enough. And before long, Siddharth Bachchan's attacks visibly slowed down. And finally, this is it. The Dragon King Antares, who watched the scene from afar, muttered indifferently. An inferior vessel eventually breaks. Thud. Siddharth Bachchan's hands fell to the ground. Charred black. Ding. Level 100 achieved. The completion conditions for Job Change Quest Dragon King's Trial 2 have been met. A mysterious wind wrapped around Suho's body, and the Dragon King's flames died down as if suppressed by magic. Chapter 217, Chapter 216, The Tattered Astra, riddled with holes, scattered like ash into the sky where the heat of battle had subsided. The scene was reminiscent of the gray snowstorm that fell in the grave of berserk dragons. The Dragon King's eyes shimmered with complex emotions as he silently watched the scene. He recalled the war with the Shadow Army, a war he lost long ago. The King of Dragons, the Monarch of Destruction Antares. The flames emanating from the heart of the Dragon King he gave to Suho were truly the power of destruction itself. That power was so devastating that it even inflicted permanent burns on the great Shadow Monarch, Sung Jinwoo. Sung Jinwoo had already transcended the physical limitations of humans, becoming a being who could freely change his age and physique. Yet the burns on his left hand from the Dragon King's attack remained as scars. Because it was such a powerful force of destruction, it was only natural that the axe Astra, born from the condensed mana of the outer gods, burned away without a fight. Crack, crackle, whoosh. Soon, a change also occurred in Siddharth Bachchan's charred body. The star fragments embedded throughout the corpse cracked and shattered all at once. The star fragments in the bodies of the Dragonid soldiers following him also shattered, and eventually, the mana of the outer gods condensed within them began to leak out like blue steam. Seeing this phenomenon occurring simultaneously everywhere, the Dragon King Antares scoffed as if he had expected it. The precariously maintained balance has collapsed. As expected, only dragons can withstand dragon blood. As a rule, great power required a suitable vessel. The dragon blood, which had been forcibly suppressed by the outer gods' power, now ran rampant, burning them. Fizzle! They turned to ash and scattered without a sound. But ironically, an expression of relief appeared on their dying faces. Just like the Dragonids who became Suho's shadow soldiers earlier, they too could finally find peace. Their minds and bodies were possessed by the power of the outer gods, but their souls were in constant pain. This works out well. If we feed these guys to Ragnar, his mana will increase a little. The Dragon King Antares muttered so, spreading his short arms wide and taking a deep breath. Swoosh! The mana emanating from the corpses of the dying Dragonids burned brightly and was absorbed into Ragnar's small body. Bloodstone? Aesiel tilted her head as she watched the scene from afar. Noticing her gaze, the Dragon King clicked his tongue in displeasure. Don't compare it to the bloodstones of demon nobles. The blood of dragons is superior to the blood of any other race. The quantity and quality of mana are far more mighty and noble. But all the dragons are dead, except for one, right? Antari silently glared at Aesiel for her cheeky retort. But what could he do about the truth? Just as only Aesiel remained of the demon nobles, the reality was that only one dragon remained. However, Antari's fierce glare was so intense that Aesiel averted her eyes and quickly ran to Suho. Suho, are you okay? I'm okay? Are you really? Contrary to Aesiel's concern, Suho really was completely fine. He recovered from all status effects upon leveling up, and the heart of the Dragon King was no longer emitting heat. There was a minor problem that all his clothes had been burned away, but even that was solved by buying suitable garments from the shop window. Whoosh. As Suho put on his clothes, the shadow's energy that had been swirling around his body and appropriately covering his vital parts gathered into one and transformed into Beru, who wept and massaged Suho's shoulders. Keek, you were amazing, my liege. Please forgive this incompetent servant who could only watch your suffering. Why are you being so dramatic now? It couldn't be helped for the experience points. That is, of course, true. How could I dare hinder your growth, my liege? He didn't know what to say. Suho stared intently at Beru, but T wasn't wrong. Beru was a shadow soldier belonging to Sung Jinwoo, not Suho. If he participated in battle, the experience points Suho gained would naturally decrease. It was also uncertain how much help Beru would actually be in combat. Even though I've been diligently feeding him magic stones, he's still in his shrunken form. Of course, this didn't mean that he hadn't recovered any mana at all. He knew why Beru was still maintaining his mini-Beru form despite recovering some mana. He wanted to prevent even the last shred of magic power from leaking. That's why Suho couldn't help but be curious. Just how strong was Beru? He now considered himself quite strong, but he still couldn't grasp the power of Beru, who hadn't even fully recovered his mana. That meant that Beru was either excellent at hiding his power, or Suho's sense stat was still far below Beru's. Keek, why are you looking at me like that? There's still a long way to go. Suho shook his head and turned his gaze to Aesiel. By the way, have you found any traces of the demons? Yes, as you said, I'm sure there's a factory somewhere around here. Apart from the large-scale battle that had taken place, Aesiel had been keeping all her senses alert to detect the presence of demons. I thought so. It was strange that there would be no demons in a place with so much stardust. One of the main ingredients of star pieces embedded in the dragonids' bodies was demon blood, and the only beings who could make those were demons. And Aesiel, the only existing demon noble, had a mission to gather all the demons and rebuild the demon world. Of course, she also had a duty to personally punish those who were completely possessed by the outer gods. I'm still too weak. To be of any help to Suho, I need to at least recover my original power. And then, Aesiel swallowed hard. Through Suho's battle just now, Aesiel had clearly realized something. Suho was growing at an overwhelmingly faster rate than she was recovering her original power, even though she was S-rank by human standards. Even Suho, the son of Sung Jinwoo, was like this, so she couldn't even imagine how tremendous Shadow Monarch's power must be as he was currently engaged in an all-out war with Itarim in outer space. Moreover, what about those Itarim beings, against whom even Sung Jinwoo couldn't return to Earth because of the intense struggle? Seeing Siddharth Bachchan's Astra, Aesiel shuddered at the glimpse of the power possessed by the Itarim beings, and she reaffirmed her resolve to shake off her fear. To lessen the burden on Sung Jinwoo, I need to recover my power as soon as possible and inherit the monarch's power. The king of demons, the monarch of white flames, Baran. To inherit his power, the first priority was to gather the demons scattered throughout the dimensional gap in one place. Aesiel pointed somewhere with her finger, following the traces of the demons she had discovered, and said to Suho, "It was confusing because so many troops were concentrated in one place, but I think it's in that direction. Judging from the fact that the demon's presence disappears halfway, it's highly likely that they've hidden the factory inside a dungeon. Then there's a high chance that the dungeon is a fragment of the demon world. That's right. Suho nodded and turned towards the direction Essil was pointing. Seeing this, she asked flustered, "Are you planning to go right away?" "It'll be a piece of cake. You don't even know what's beyond the gate, and you're going in without any preparation. I'll prepare now." With that answer, Suho's gaze turned to the side. There lay the corpse of Siddharth Bachchan, turned into a pile of black ashes. Shadow extraction is possible on this target. A smile appeared on Suho's lips. That's a relief. I was worried that his soul might be contaminated and extraction might not be possible. Siddharth Bachchan. He would be a bit weaker than he was when he was alive if he became a shadow soldier, but Suho was already looking forward to how useful he would be.
Wah!
In front of Suho's eyes, Siddharth Bachchan's shadow writhed like boiling lava, screaming like a demon from hell. He couldn't tell what the scream meant, whether the end of that deep resentment was directed at Suho, who killed him, or at Itarim, who had played with his soul. But at least one thing was certain. Do you want to live again? The scream of the dead intensified at Suho's question, who smiled and willingly extended his hand towards the shadow. I have many questions for you. Arise. Attempting shadow extraction. Extraction in progress. Ding. Shadow extraction failed. Hey you. Suho's solemn expression faltered for a moment. He really didn't expect it to fail. It felt good, though. The Dragon King Antares, who was watching from the side, couldn't help but chuckle. He's a proud one. He's a guy who consumed a lot of dragon blood, claiming to succeed me, so it wouldn't be very dignified to readily join the Shadow Army, would it? You have 2 more chances. Hearing the Dragon King's words, Suho spoke again. Arise. Ding. Shadow extraction failed. You have 1 more chance. Suho's gaze intently focused on Siddharth Bachchan's shadow, which was flickering restlessly. The Dragon King Antares smiled again as he watched Suho fail once more. This proves one thing for sure. You were merely born as the son of the Shadow Monarch. You are far inferior to him. Keek! How dare he evaluate someone? My liege, don't be fooled by such an obvious provocation. To mock someone with such obvious words that aren't even worth paying attention to. It's possible for extraction to fail if the stat difference between the extraction target and you is too large. Why was it? Why did Beru, who was trying to comfort him from the side, seem more annoying than the Dragon King who was teasing him openly? Stat difference. Suho knew very well what those words meant. He had no intention of getting carried away. I was only able to kill this guy thanks to the heart the Dragon King gave me. From Siddharth Bachchan's perspective, who had become a charred lump of coal because of the Dragon King's heart, it was only natural that he wouldn't want to acknowledge Suho. But, so what if he didn't acknowledge him? There was only one truth. I have earned the qualification of the Dragon King. It was a reward he obtained by fairly overcoming the Dragon King's trial. Therefore, thump, thump, Suho's hand rested on his chest. Feeling the strong beating of the heart of the Dragon King transmitted from within, he gave one final command to Siddharth Bachchan, with utmost confidence and arrogance. Arise. Flare. In an instant, with the warmth rising from the heart of the Dragon King, Siddharth Bachchan's soul cried out, Kya! I, the son of the great Shadow Monarch and the one qualified as the Dragon King, command you, arise and bow, you half-baked mutant who aspired to become a dragon yourself. Your name is now Sita. Ding, shadow extraction successful. Swoosh! A pitch-black shadow fiercely swirled over the charred ashes. The shadows intertwined, and a pair of black, dragon-like wings spread wide. A giant shadow dragonid with black smoke billowing from its entire body, a mixture of wyvern, naga, true dragon, and human form. The energy emanating from his entire body possessed power on a different level than any shadow soldier he had seen before. Sineral Grade, I heed your call, noble one. Sita bowed deeply before Suho, his magnificent wings spread on the ground, hot flames blazing along his entire body. Chapter 218, Chapter 217, Guildmaster, we're not dreaming right now, are we? Don't ask me. I feel like I'm about to pass out too. Ali Hassan, the Guildmaster of the Imphal Guild, and his subordinates, who had been watching the whole battle from afar, were completely dumbfounded. They had been far away from the scene, rescuing the kidnapped poor people as Suho and Liu Zhigang had instructed. However, the scale of the battle was so large that it wasn't difficult to witness the series of scenes from a distance. If this is really a dream, I feel like I've had all the nightmares I'll ever have in my life today. Ali Hassan muttered, swallowing hard. If this was really a dream, it was the worst nightmare imaginable. Suddenly, a winged dragonid army appeared and covered the entire sky. Then Siddharth Bachchan, who was supposed to be a hero of India, suddenly appeared as a monster, and the giant axe he wielded split the city in two. However, the most surprising thing out of all this was Sung Suho. Yes, that man who came from Korea. Who the hell is that guy? I've never heard of such a hunter existing in Korea. Is it true that even China's 6-star hunter, Liu Zhigong, is willing to be his subordinate? Where the hell did such a monster come from? But the truly shocking thing happened next. Siddharth Bachchan's shadow rose from his corpse, defying death. Huh. Oh my god. Thud. They collapsed on the spot, their legs giving way. They had been following Suho and knew that he used necromancer skills. They had seen the countless shadow soldiers following him. But the sight of him reviving even Siddharth Bachchan, the hero of India who had just displayed such overwhelming power as a soldier of death, was beyond shock and horror. Gu Guildmaster, what's going on? What's going to happen to us now? Did we just see something we weren't supposed to? The anxious and confused gazes of the Imphal Guild members, each filled with their own worries, focused on Ali Hassan. But it was in this critical moment that his leadership shone. His survival instincts, honed from being born in the slums and surviving until now, allowed him to make a decision. What to do? Why, of course. Hey, you guys, why am I the guild master? Huh? What are you talking about? Are you out of your mind? Our guild master is right there, so why are you calling me that? A shocking declaration suddenly erupted from him. The guild member's eyes widened. Ali Hassan's finger pointed at Hunter Sung Suho. He blamed his bewildered subordinates for their ignorance and declared confidently, "We are now the Wujin Guild. That's that!" He wasn't joking. Ali Hassan was serious. Imphal is doomed anyway. It's only a matter of time before today's incident becomes known to the world. Who will people blame then? The Asura Guild, whose guildmaster is dead? That's a given. But what's the point of blaming them when the person involved is already dead? The Asura Guild was practically annihilated as of today, but the world won't let go so easily. If an incident of this magnitude occurs, someone has to take responsibility. Ali Hassan closed his eyes with a dizzying feeling. The biggest problem here was that their guild was called the Imphal Guild. Depending on what we do here, we could be blamed, or our lives could turn around. Ali Hassan used his extreme survival instincts to grasp his situation and find what he had to do. The Imphal Guild no longer exists. We were subordinates of Guildmaster Sung Suho all along. So from now on, his eyes flashed as he ordered his subordinates, we tracked down Governor Manu Kizal, who colluded with Siddharth Bachchan and orchestrated everything. We need to handle these troublesome matters ourselves and somehow help Guildmaster Sung Suho. Got it? Yes, sir. Now scatter. At Ali Hassan's fierce roar, the Imphal Guild members scattered to find Manu Kizal. A while later, we found Manu Kizal. Ali Hassan's subordinates finally die in finding the governor. Manu Kizal, sensing the change, had been trying to sneak out of the city and cross the Chinese border when he was caught and dragged back by the Imphal Guild's pursuit team. After being captured by the hunters, he made excuses with a pale face. I'm a victim too. I just did as I was told because I didn't want to die. And so the governor abandons his land and runs away. Who said I ran away? I was just trying to ask for help from outside. Oh, and so you crossed the Chinese border? Asking another country for help with your own country's affairs? Not because you were trying to defect because our government would hold you accountable? Please spare me. I'm truly innocent. Manu Kizal begged with tears in his eyes, unable to properly defend himself. Ali Hassan grabbed him by the collar and glared. Governor, remember this. There's only one reason why we're keeping you alive, to inform the outside world about everything you've done in this land with the Asura Guild. No, please, not that. If you do that, Oh, that's right. How about this? I'll take responsibility and fully support your guild as the representative guild of Imphal. Manu Kazal desperately tried to persuade them. He knew that Ali Hassan was from the slums. If he gave money and honor to the one who was of the lowest status, he could surely be persuaded. But he failed miserably. Ali Hassan revealed his teeth meaningfully. It's too late. We're not the Imphal Guild anymore. We've become part of Sung Suho's Woojin Guild. Of course, it wasn't official yet. Who is Sung Suho, you ask? He's the strongest hunter in Korea who killed Siddharth Bachchan. But if he could use this guy to somehow help him, it was clear that Suho would look favorably upon them. Moreover, didn't the Woojin Guild already have the Chinese Liu Jigong and the Indian Rio Singh? At this point, it was no different from a world alliance, not just a Korean guild. So, Governor, there's a lot you need to do from now on. If you refuse, I'll kill you right now and throw your body into a dungeon. Eek! Manu Kizal finally lowered his head at the murderous intent emanating from the guildmaster of the small guild he had been ignoring. From the moment Manu Kizal crossed the Chinese border, it was only a matter of time before this incident spread to the world through China. And with Liu Jigong's presence in this land, China was already paying close attention to Imphal. In the first place, the city was split in two right in front of the border, and dragonids were swarming and flying around. It was on a scale that China couldn't possibly miss. But even if they saw it clearly right in front of them, whether they liked it or not, this information was probably spreading to the world at a rapid pace at this very moment. Then, what came next was important. Manu Kizal, as the governor of Imphal, inform our government of all these facts without omission. What do you mean? The fact that Korea's Woojin Guild saved our country, India. From now on, the hero of India would be Sung Suho, not Siddharth Bachchan. Not caring about what was happening behind him, Suho focused on the most important task: clearing the Void Gate dungeon, the dimensional gap that had occurred in this land. To do that, he had to conquer all the nearby dungeons that the Asura Guild had monopolized. That way, he could collect the Stardust necklaces from the citizens living in this land and prevent them from being possessed by the outer gods. I need to hurry. It wouldn't be strange if another apostle of Itarim popped up in a place like this. Fortunately, he had turned Siddharth Bachchan, the culprit behind all this, into a shadow soldier, so things were proceeding smoothly. Sita, lead me to the place where the star pieces were made. Your command is my will. Swish! At Suho's command, Sita spread his wings without a word and bowed his head. Suho grabbed his horns and stepped on his head to climb on, as if it were natural. This action would have been incredibly humiliating for Siddharth Bachchan when he was alive. But for the current Sita, it was an extremely honorable thing. Give me a ride too. Of course, it was different for others. Sita couldn't even complain and only gritted his teeth slightly at Esil's impudent act of climbing onto his back after Suho. Then Liu Jigong and Rio Singh also climbed on. I'm coming too. Suho, me too. Thump. Watch your expression. Sorry. Only when Suho's foot pressed down on his head did Sita's expression become respectful again. Even though he had been possessed by the outer gods, he was well aware of the sins he had committed when he was alive. The countless dragonids gathered in this area, and the countless people that died without even becoming dragonids. That terrible sin was a debt that Sita would have to repay forever. As expected, the demon's star fragment factory was hidden inside a dungeon. The moment they stepped in, Esil revealed her presence without holding back. Kneel, demons. The lower-ranking demons who were working for Siddharth Bachchan in the dungeon widened their eyes. A demon noble had suddenly appeared before them. I am Esil, the eldest daughter of the Radiru family, the one and only existing demon noble, Esil Radiru. Ooh! The demons cried out at Esil's dignity and swore their allegiance without a word. There was no one daring enough to object. The situation was different from the demon world they found in Korea. Unlike then, Esil had recovered a significant amount of her original power, and she no longer was at a level where mere low-ranking demons could defy her. Moreover, Shell was currently riding on the back of Siddharth Bachchan, who had been forcing them to work. The sight was reminiscent of the great king of demons, Baran, who used to fly around on the back of the wyvern, Kaiselan, long ago. Suho, can you put these demons into your shadow? You mean take them all to the demon world in Korea? Yes. To prepare for the war with Itarim, we need to gather the scattered demons in one place, and looking at their condition, they won't last long here. Esil looked up at the sky of the demon world, where the rifts had become severe, with a bitter expression. This place, like the demon world in Korea, was one of the fragments of the demon world that had been torn into many pieces and was drifting through the dimensional gaps. However, perhaps due to the influence of Itarim's apostle, the sky here was even more torn than the sanctuary in the glacier dungeon. Suho nodded. All right, we need to eliminate all the magical beasts inside to close the gate anyway. Suho immediately took out the key to the shadow dungeon and sent the demons into his shadow one by one. In the process, he didn't forget to collect all the star pisses they had created and the magic stones that seemed to be the materials for them. Oh my god, so many magic stones. Ryo Singh's eyes widened at the tremendous amount. Guild Master Sung Suho, it seems most of the magic stones that the Asura Guild was keeping are here. He was assured once again, I've chosen the right side. As expected, life is inshallah. The thrill started from his toes, shooting up his spine to the top of his head. Ryo Singh realized anew what a great and monumental decision it was to join the Wujin Guild. To think that I, who was struggling to get promoted in the Asura Guild, would become an executive of the guild that swallowed all their assets. If no one could be held accountable for murder in a dungeon, then what about something like stealing? The goods stored inside a dungeon were nobody's. It was just normal loot. Wow, how much would all this be if we sold it? Even Ryo Singh's brilliant calculator broke down. As of today, the Wujin Guild led by Suho had acquired the assets accumulated by the Asura Guild, the strongest guild in India. Chapter 219, Chapter 218, Hell on Earth, India's Loktak Field. A few days later, a provocative news story unexpectedly took the world by storm. Originating in China, the news spread globally, eventually reaching Korea. Every phrase was sensational. The ugly truth of India's large guild, Asura. A world where humans experiment on fellow humans. The poor forcibly mutated into magical beasts. All sorts of provocative headlines plastered the world as if in competition. Usually, only the headlines were attention-grabbing, with the content proving rather mundane, but this time was different. It wasn't clickbait. The headlines alone couldn't fully capture the horrific deeds committed by the Asura Guild in India. Public reaction was intense. Oh my god! They kidnapped poor people and conducted biological experiments on them? A cruel and inhumane incident that could only have happened during World War II, taking place in modern times? At least back then, it was during a war. This time, they targeted their own citizens. How could this happen? Are humans more cruel than magical beasts? People worldwide were focused on the incident in India. Block the information somehow. At this rate, our country's image will be completely ruined. That's not easy. The Indian government made every effort to restore its image, but it was impossible. The source of the news was the Chinese government, currently in a border standoff with India. Every attempt to salvage their image only fanned the flames. The Indian government's desperate relief policy was only enacted when their feet were on fire. But they're all already dead. Do you fix the barn after losing the cow? All the cattle were lost. No, they lost their humanity. Even the families who would mourn the victims have been sacrificed. The biggest problem was that the Loktak Field remained a dangerous, unconquered land. The Indian government desperately gathered hunters from across the nation to conquer the Loktak Field dungeon, which they had entrusted to the Asura Guild and then neglected. This wasn't easy. Even the authorities couldn't force hunters into dangerous dungeons. It was against international law. Loktak Field? Are you crazy? Why should we go into that dangerous place? We're busy enough conquering nearby dungeons. There's no need to risk our lives. Do you think Loktak is the only problem? The dungeons we're currently conquering are all for our citizens. Naturally, most hunter guilds flatly refused the government's request. Actually, isn't the Hunter Association there for times like this? That's right, they've probably already left. The responsibility ultimately fell to the hunters of the Indian Association, who closed their eyes tightly as they looked at the order from the government. Ha! Do they think association hunters have 3 or 4 lives? We only have 1. Do you even know how many troops we need to sweep that vast land swarming with Nagas? Our forces alone are nowhere near enough. Association President, can't you request more support from outside? Even foreign mercenaries. What was the Loktak Field in the first place? Centered around Loktak Lake, a large reservoir in Manipur, India, it was a super large field, an unprecedentedly dangerous area where dungeon breaks occurred simultaneously in 5 locations. That's why they were overjoyed when the Asura Guild stepped up, claiming to resolve the Loktak Field, but it turned out that it was all to commit cruel acts in a place hidden from the public eye. Of course, the Asura Guild was annihilated and paid for their sins with death. But that was the biggest problem. No matter how wicked the Asura Guild was, they weren't just playing around. They distributed star fragment necklaces to prevent citizens from turning into mistburns and tried to keep magical beasts from approaching urban areas. Of course, they didn't accomplish those things themselves, but squeezed the Imphal guilds in the area to do them. At least they were taking minimal measures. However, with Te, the sudden annihilation of the Asura Guild, unexpected problems were erupting everywhere. Kwar! Kya! The magical beasts wandering within the Loktak Field started rampaging with even more ferocity than usual. This is hell on earth. Ha, damn it. I shouldn't have joined the association. I shouldn't have been tempted by the free rental of basic equipment sets and association items. I should have just formed a small personal raid party. Alright, enough complaining. Let's all meet again alive. The hunters of the Indian Association, who set foot in the Loktak Field, each gripped their weapons with determined expressions. And while they were doing this, the world's attention was not on their lives, but on the identity of the people who had annihilated the Asura Guild. In fact, that was the hottest issue and the fundamental reason why China was actively adding fuel to the fire. China's 6-star hunter, Liu Jigang. Liu Jigang, the great hunter of China, who annihilated the Asura Guild. The reason Liu Jigang crossed the Indian border was to save the poor citizens. Under international law, the act of a powerful person like Liu Jigang crossing the border of another country without permission was a diplomatic issue far greater than imaginable. But as was the case when Thomas Andre suddenly visited Korea, there was no way to stop them if they were determined to move. In the first place, the difference between a hunter and a villain was as thin as a sheet of paper. It was a matter of whether they operated within the boundaries of the law, and the only way to stop them was to appeal to their humanity or resolve the issue with money. When the Chinese government learned that Liu Jigang had suddenly crossed over to India, they were restless and desperately prayed that he wouldn't cause any trouble. But what was this windfall? Thanks to Manu Kizal, the governor of Imphal, who came to ask for help, China learned about the atrocities of the Asura Guild, and the current situation was the result of hurriedly launching a media campaign, and China's strategy was working beyond expectations. Wow, I knew Liu Jigang was amazing, but he's really strong. Was he able to annihilate the Asura Guild alone? Siddharth Bachchan was also an S-rank hunter. Is Liu Jigang much stronger? Didn't you know? Only China gives ranks like 1-star, 2-star, regardless of international ranks. An S-rank hunter is a 5-star in China, but only Liu Jigang is a 6-star. That's amazing. Then could China have conquered India by force all along if they wanted to? You idiot. Then it would be a real war. Would the World Hunter Association just sit back and watch that? Hunters are humanity's shield, not tools of war. Success! Everyone is praising our China. Ooh-ha-ha, this is the way. Long live the People's Republic of China. The Chinese government cheered as they watched the global public opinion revolving around Liu Jigang. And they started to move even more actively. Launch all the drone cameras we have. Send them all to India and broadcast Mr. Liu Jigang's activities in real time. Gasp. But will it be all right? Crossing the border with drones without permission violates international law. Fool, are you trying to be bound by such trivial laws in a situation like this? What if Mr. Liu Jigang suffers some harm from those Indians in such a dangerous place? Mr. Liu Jigang is struggling in another country. We need to closely monitor and at least provide him with proper meals. Understood. Thus, thousands of drone cameras from China took flight and crossed the Indian border. This was a clear violation of international law. But as China expected, India couldn't respond. From the moment the drones crossed the border, it was the Loktak field, a lawless zone. And live broadcast from China begins. Wow, isn't this illegal? Is that important now? I wanted to see how strong China's hero Liu Zhigang is, so this is great. Public opinion had already completely shifted towards China, taking advantage of the opportunity to fully grasp the attention of worldwide media. The Chinese government actively manipulated the drones to track down Liu Zhigang. Viewers around the world watched with bated breath, gasping or exclaiming in awe at the sight of the fearsome Nagas throughout the field. The viewership ratings are higher than the Olympics. Good. It's time to show the world China's prestige. Have you found Mr. Liu Zhigang? We found him. And finally, the moment everyone was waiting for arrived. Thud! Beyond the countless screens, Liu Zhigang was fighting against the ferociously rampaging Nagas. They saw the giant screaming and collapsing helplessly before him. Rumble. The ground shook. Liu Zhigang brushed back his disheveled white hair with one hand and glanced at the drone in the distance with a disapproving look. But as soon as he spotted a new magical beast in his vicinity, he dashed forward and swung his sword. Flash! Amazing. That old man is really incredible. He seems stronger than Thomas Andre at this point. Why is Thomas Andre being mentioned here? That old man was recently arrested for murder. He'll probably rot in jail until he dies. But isn't this India? What are the Indian hunters doing? Why are we only seeing Liu Zhigang? The Chinese government, analyzing the real-time public opinion, came up with an even better plan. Yes, instead of just showing Liu Zhigang with these many drones, it would be much more effective to show the weaklings of the Indian Association in comparison. Yes, we will spread the drones as wide as possible and film. One should strike while the iron is hot. The Chinese government actively controlled the drones to show the world what was happening in the Loktak field as widely as possible. Oh, the streaming service is on fire. I know this is illegal, but I can't take my eyes off it. And finally, they appeared. As China expected, the hunters sent by the Indian Association began to be captured one by one on thousands of drone cameras, fighting in various parts of the Loktak field. They were quite skilled and were putting up a good fight. However, unlike Liu Zhigang, who would rush in regardless of the situation as soon as he saw a magical beast, the Indian hunters were fighting in a very orthodox way. The tanker defended in front, and the dealer hid behind and focused on attacking. The sight of them encouraging each other and engaging in a solid battle, unfortunately, only looked cowardly to the viewers who had already seen Liu Zhigang's battle. They're being cautious. They're so passive, even though it's their own country's business. Huh? Isn't that a boss monster? At that moment, a giant Naga, overwhelmingly larger than the other magical beasts, appeared in front of the Indian hunters. Oh, damn it! It's a boss monster! This was bad. Not only was it huge, but it also exuded strength on a different level from ordinary Nagas. It seemed to have absorbed a significant amount of blue mist, as its scales and the magical energy emanating from its body were completely different from other Nagas. Kya! Thump, thump, thump! The sight of the monstrously large magical beast charging with tremendous force was so overwhelming that even the chat window, which had been buzzing nonstop, froze. Everyone scatter. The Indian hunters desperately scattered. If they stayed put, they would be trampled to death. But not everyone could escape. Hunters with relatively poor physical abilities, such as healers and buffers, were about to be trampled to death. But that's when it happened. It's Liu Zhigang. Liu Zhigang, who had come running after hearing the commotion, immediately fired sword energy from afar. Stop right there! Flash! Kwang! The sword energy, packed with tremendous mana, flew and caused an explosion on the creature's broad back. Kyak! With a scream, a wound ripped open and blood splattered. Did he finish it off? Are you crazy? A boss monster wouldn't die from that. Unfortunately, Liu Zhigang's attack seemed to have only enraged the giant Naga. As if taking out his frustration on the hunters who hadn't escaped yet, the giant swung its front paw down with a ferocious force. Kyak! Whoosh! At the critical moment when everyone closed their eyes, a wind blew. I almost lost the experience points. Suho, who arrived in front of them in the blink of an eye, adjusted his posture and clenched his fist. Flare. Then, with a hot energy surging from his heart, his forearms swelled up. "I'm going all out." His eyes gleamed as he confirmed the target. And thud! The moment Suho's first reached the giant Naga's body, the wind blew again. Along with it, the thick scales infused with the mana of the outer gods, the tough skin, and all the internal organs within were all swept away and burst out. Huh. An involuntary chuckle escaped Liu Zhigang's lips. A huge hole took up more than half of the body of the giant Naga that was running with great momentum. A miracle unfolded before the eyes of the world. Chapter 220, Chapter 219. For a brief moment, it felt like time had stopped. Thud! Thud! Blue blood and pieces of flesh rained down from the sky. The surreal scene was broadcast live across the globe, a spectacle so shocking that no one dared to speak. What was once a giant magical beast had just exploded like a balloon due to an overwhelming force. After a while, the frozen chat window started moving again. Countless question marks began to flood chat windows worldwide. The scene was so shocking that people's minds couldn't process it, leaving only a sea of question marks. Then, someone finally managed to type a coherent sentence. Who is that? The Chinese government, which was in charge of the live broadcast, was also in chaos. Who the hell is that hunter? We're trying to identify him now. Surely he must be one of our people, right? Right? He has to be. The adjutant responded to his superior, who was anxiously muttering while biting his nails, with a forced smile. Of course he is, judging by his hair color and the fact that he's working with Mr. Liu Zhigang. Then why don't we know him? If there was a hunter stronger than Mr. Liu Zhigang, why wouldn't we know about him? We'll find out as soon as possible. The emotion on the faces of the staff hurriedly typing on their keyboards and searching the association's database was the same. Anxiety. They were extremely tense. He has to be Chinese. Please let him be a Chinese hunter. The reason they boldly deployed the drone unit, even violating international law, was that they were confident of reaping more than what they invested in this incident. International law? They could make some excuse later and get away with it. If it didn't work out, they could just offer a sincere apology and appropriate compensation to the Indian government through diplomats. On the other hand, the political advantage and great glory that the Chinese government would gain from this incident were immeasurable, impossible to convert into money. It was none other than Liu Zhigang. The fact that the strongest hunter representing China was saving India and showing his great achievements to the world was worth that much. Politically, in terms of brand value, everything was in our favor. But things had gone wrong. A fatal error had occurred in their perfect calculation. Something terrible has happened. Suddenly, one of the staff members screamed, his face pale. Unfortunately, what he was pointing at with his trembling fingertip was not the Chinese Association's hunter list. It was the chat window. In the chat windows from all over the world, Korean was being translated in real time. Isn't that guy a Korean hunter? Oh, you're right. I've seen that face in the news. What, a Korean? Who is he? Isn't it this guy? Attached link to a related article. What is this? Someone had been kind enough to even post a link, clicking on which they found a video capture of an A-rank villain incident that occurred in Korea. 3 hunters and a giant beehive. The recording showed 3 hunters with black wings soaring towards a giant beehive that had formed on top of a high-rise building. 2 of them were the relatively well-known Lim Tae-ju and Baek Mi-ho, and the other one was undoubtedly the same man who was currently in India. Damn it! Bang! A fist slammed down, shattering the desk. But no one here was in any state to be surprised by that. They were already dumbfounded enough. They were doomed. A single sentence pierced their minds. He isn't Chinese? Was this what they called making rice cakes and feeding them to dogs? They tried to show off China's combat strength to the world, even violating international law, but they ended up promoting a Korean hunter who displayed even more tremendous achievements. And they even made him stand out more by using Liu Zhigang as a point of comparison. We're truly doomed. It was disastrous. It seemed like they would have to deal with a lot of things, both internationally and domestically. Packing up and fleeing abroad might be the quickest solution. The perfect option came to someone's mind, but they couldn't bring themselves to act on it. Tsk, doing useless things. Liu Zhigang clicked his tongue with a displeased expression as he looked at the drones flying overhead. Judging from the direction they came from, it seemed like they were sent from China. Bang! He lightly swung his sword and smashed one of the most annoying ones as if swatting a fly, then approached Suho and said, "I'm sorry about this. Your face has been exposed because of me." "It's all right." Suho shrugged nonchalantly, brushing the magical beast's blood off his fist. "I recently got permission from my father." "That's a relief then. Strictly speaking, it wasn't his father, but his father's illusion that gave him permission, but it wasn't entirely wrong either. Moreover, now that he had surpassed level 100 and became strong enough to deal with Itarim's apostle alone, it was more beneficial to actively seek them out rather than hide his identity. "Are you all right?" Suho turned his head and checked on the people he had rescued. The hunters from the Indian Association bowed their heads towards Suho and expressed their gratitude in English. Thank you. Thank you for saving us." As they voiced their appreciation, the Indian hunters were a little worried about the expressions on their faces. They were grateful to be rescued, but, honestly, it's scary. Can we even consider this person to be the same as us? They knew. This was quite disrespectful to the person who saved their lives. In fact, regardless of rank, fellow hunters understood each other's hardships without having to say anything. The gaze they received from everyone around them the moment they awakened their magic power. Ordinary people didn't see hunters as the same as them. The media always praised hunters as humanity's shield, but in reality, they were no different from talking magical beasts to ordinary people. It was natural to feel apprehensive. Superhumans who could throw cars and collapse buildings at any moment were living among ordinary citizens as if they were the same. It was unfair to the hunters who risked their lives to save humanity. Quite a few hunted magical beasts even more diligently with the mindset of earning more money out of frustration. But now they completely understood. Just like the ordinary people who were grateful to the hunters, yet looked at them with fear in their eyes, they were now looking at Suho with the same gaze. It was at least A-rank magical beast. Even if they tried not to, their gaze unconsciously drifted to the remains of the magical beast that Suho had blown up with one punch. Maybe it was S-rank. They hadn't been able to properly measure it, but recalling the overwhelming pressure they felt for a moment, it was possible that it was an S-rank magical beast, and the superhuman who had blown up that tremendous boss monster with one punch was standing before them. "Are you an S-rank hunter?" Someone mustered up the courage to break the awkward silence, but everyone knew it was a useless question. What was the point of asking? Everyone knew that Liu Zhigang, who was visible right across from them, was a 6-star hunter from China, and this man in front of them had performed an even more powerful attack than him. In fact, an S-rank hunter meant someone who surpassed the range of the magic power measuring device created by humans and was deemed unmeasurable. Therefore, even among S-rank hunters, their power varied greatly, but they couldn't tell them to fight amongst themselves to determine who's stronger. If someone died, it would be a loss both nationally and for humanity. It was also a common theory that the aftermath of that battle could wipe out at least one city. But now that they had witnessed an S-rank hunter blowing up a boss monster like a balloon with one punch, they immediately understood. As expected, S-rank hunters are amazing, but Suho's expression was somewhere at awkward when asked that question. Scratch. Suho scratched his cheek sheepishly and opened his mouth. His English wasn't good enough to give a long explanation, so he just went straight to the point. "I'm C-rank." "Huh?" The confusion deepened. Suho brought all the Indian hunters to Imphal, and he entrusted them with protecting the citizens, not hunting magical beasts. With Ryo Singh, a fellow Indian, interpreting, the conversation became much smoother. "While our guild master is hunting magical beasts, please prevent them from entering the city. We can fight too. We'll help, even if our strength is lacking." The hunters of the Indian Association, suddenly treated as weaklings, felt powerless, but didn't forget their duty. But Ryo Singh was firm. It's all right. Our guildmaster will take care of it." They couldn't understand at all. They knew Suho was strong, but this field was too vast, and there were too many magical beasts. Even with China's Mr. Liu Zhigang helping, you'll need a lot of manpower to find and hunt all those magical beasts. Mr. Liu Zhigang is resting over there. Huh? At Ryo Sing's words, everyone's gaze turned to the side. Liu Zhigang, who was the center of attention, was really just relaxing, even getting a shoulder massage from Essel. Ahem, I told you it's all right. I'm just doing this because I'm bored. Even Essel was excluded as someone who would hinder Suho's leveling up. What? You're really going to take care of it alone? Suho left the dumbfounded Indian hunters behind and walked alone towards the magical beasts rampaging outside the city. Then he suddenly looked up and glanced at the drone cameras flying in the sky. A worldwide broadcast, it's a bit burdensome. It's rather a good thing. Beru, who peeked out from beside him, had a glint in his eyes. The higher the level, the more experience points required for leveling up. But now, despite just defeating a boss monster, he still couldn't level up. It will be impossible for you to level up by hunting just a few small fries, my liege. From now on, it would be faster to make the strong ones come to us. Suho nodded at Beru's suggestion. To show those Itarim guys hiding around the world what they were capable of. All right, let's show them. At that moment, flare. The magic power he received from the Dragon Emperor surged within him. Whoosh! A black shadow spread from his feet, covering the ground. Come out, everyone. At Suho's command, thousands of shadow soldiers rose in unison, with jet-black smoke billowing, Kya! And the moment that scene was broadcast worldwide, the Chinese server crashed due to chat overload.